this session, so I don't know. Oh, there we go. It's gone. Thank you.
Ask and thou shalt receive.
Yeah. Oops.
And can people hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good morning. I'd like to call the July 11th, 2025 meeting of the Oregon Climate Action Commission to order. And welcome to commissioners and members of the public. Thank you for joining our meeting today. If you could go to the next slide, please, Jen, and kind of remind folks how to use WebEx and how to sign up to provide comments.
Hi everyone, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Today we'll be using WebEx. As always, you'll see the icons there to mute and unmute just by clicking on that mic icon, as well as for the video icon. To turn on your video, please click on it, and to turn off your video, please click off. Also on the three dots, if you click on it, you're also able to raise your hand if you want to make a comment or ask a question.
Great. Thank you. Next slide, please. Today we have a full agenda. We're going to be, after we have our opening remarks and introductions and updates from commissioners, we'll be hearing about several of the deliverables that we have from the work that was assigned to us by the legislature in 2023. I'm excited to have both staff and consultants that will be talking about that work. We'll hear a recap from the 2025 legislative session, take public comments. We're anticipating that's going to happen around 12:10, and then go to closing remarks and start to think about next steps and future agenda items as we close out the meeting. Next slide, please. So for my updates, first and foremost, I want to start by welcoming a new commissioner. As we shared in our June update to commissioners in May, we were pleased to receive news of our newest appointed member, Carter McNichol. Commissioner McNichol was one of the founders of Oregon Business for Climate and Oregon Climate Action. He's served on many other boards of community and environmental nonprofit organizations, and he is filling an at-large voting seat on the commission. Welcome, Commissioner McNichol. And Carter, I wanted to give you a few minutes to tell us why you, anything else you want to add about your background, and to say a few words on what motivated you to join the commission.
Good morning, and I'm excited to be here.
Carter, we can't hear you very well.
Really? Okay, is that any better?
Not much.
Wow.
That's a little better.
Is that better?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm really thrilled to have gotten this appointment and to join you all in what I think is the critical issue for the state of Oregon. although that's not shared by everyone. But I got engaged, as Kathy mentioned, with Oregon Business for Climate, really around the Cap and Invest activity at the legislature, and we've stuck with it and come up with doing a lot of interesting new work. And so I have just a long-term interest in the natural world and environmental movements in general. And I think that this commission and the state have an opportunity to really shine in this arena. I would say that my interest in this probably increased logarithmically about a month ago when I found out I was going to be a grandfather, and that starts to make you think of the long term in new ways. So I'm excited to be here. I'm impatient and hopeful that we get a lot of work done at the state level. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner McNichol. We also have a number of new agency directors, and I wanted to just flag those for folks. As we've reported earlier, the acting state forester is Kate Skinner, and she had hoped to be with us today. I didn't see her.
I'm here.
Oh, excellent. Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm having a little video problem, but I'm here. I'm actively listening.
We can all empathize with you about that.
You'll see me pop on and off.
Thank you so much for joining us, especially knowing that there's fire season happening, and so we appreciate that you've been able to make some time for us.
Thank you.
Other changes are that Governor Kotek has made some new appointments to fill vacancies. Betsy Inholt is the new state chief operating officer and director of the Department of Administrative Services. Karin Power is now a commissioner at the Oregon Public Utility Commission, and Sean O'Day is the acting director of the Department of Consumer and Business Services. We look forward to having that all of the new appointments join us as possible. We are continuing to recruit for one voting at-large position and two non-voting at-large positions that we can fill from academic or agency personnel. I also wanted to just announce that in June, our very own Amy Slusher joined the Governor Kotek staff as her climate advisor. So we're excited about that, and glad to see her in this new role. So if any of those folks that I just mentioned are on and want to say anything, please do feel free to.
Hey, Kathy, it looks like Amy's on, but she's an attendee, so maybe we could bring
That'd
her
be great.
up.
Yeah, if you would elevate her, that'd be great. Excellent. Amy, welcome, and again, congratulations.
Hey, thanks, Kathy. I am having WebEx difficulties, unfortunately, so it will not connect to my camera. I'm sorry about that, but thank you for the kind words. And I just wanted to say I'm really excited to continue to work with the commission in my new capacity, the governor's office.
Excellent. Thank you.
Lovely to be here.
I also wanted to let our voting members and at-large non-voting members know that Jeff and I are going to be reaching out to do some one-on-one check-ins over the next several months. The check-ins will really help us improve our practices, identify any additional orientation information that might be helpful, and brainstorm how to shape future agenda items. We also certainly welcome other agency directors and our legislative members to set up time with us to anytime to check in and discuss priorities and ways that we could be doing our business more effectively. As a final comment, before I open the floor to hear from other commissioners and directors about updates they want to share. I'm sure that many of you are tracking the reports on potential impacts of changes resulting from the reconciliation bill that was signed into law a week or so ago. And what that reconciliation bill will do to future emission reduction potential. We plan to have an agenda item on in August to kind of dig into that in more detail and understand what the implications might be for the state of Oregon's efforts, as well as consider the work of the commission in relationship to that, and if we should be making some adjustments to some of the things we're focused on and how we approach our meeting agendas based on any of those changes that will be resulting from the reconciliation bill. So with that, I'll go ahead and open it up to other commissioners to provide any updates that you might want to provide, and feel free to jump in. It is challenging to see all of you. And maybe we go ahead and take the slide deck down so we can see more faces. But Commissioner Von Hagen.
Hello, everybody. I don't have an update. I just wanted to mention that I'm going to get off the phone for 10 minutes at 10 o'clock because we do have a fire in California. And I have to attend the fire cooperator meeting. So let you know in advance if I leave you, it's not personal.
Thank you, Commissioner Von Hagen. I wish you well on addressing the fire issues. And appreciate that you would need to drop off for that. Any other updates folks want to share?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. Brenda Bateman, DLCD. I actually don't have an update, but I wanted to let folks know I put in the chat, anyone having camera problems, I discovered up where the URL is, which is this very strange place. There's a little tiny icon that looks like a video camera that I needed to click this morning. That might help you too. Thanks.
Thanks, Director Bateman. I appreciate that. Let's look and see. Anybody else want to jump in? Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And I'll kick off our natural climate solutions update. As you recall, in April, we opened to public comments for hearing from folks about the potential use of additional funding as in the Natural and Working Lands Fund, how we might prioritize how we invest any new funds that we have that might be available. And we got 16 written public comments, and they had a really great information in them. Staff did an excellent job of summarizing those comments, and that the combination of the summary followed by the individual comments were posted on the meeting page for this meeting today. There was a lot of consistency in the comments about the importance role that natural and working lands have in mitigating climate change. And a couple of things that stood out to me was how consistent the input was with the input that we got during the year-plus long process when we were developing the natural and working lands proposal in 2020 and 2021. And in particular, the importance of technical assistance and incentives for landowners to adopt new practices, and then also the strong emphasis on equity in access to the funds. A third comment that I flagged for myself was in a subset of the letters there, while there was an acknowledgement of the importance of research, which is one of the authorized uses of the funds through ODFW, there was a preference for implementing projects through incentives and technical assistance at this time. So we'll want to, consider and discuss all of this input as we, in any future allocations of natural climate solutions funds. And the next bullet, well, there was strong advocacy for getting additional funding during the 2025 session. We were not successful in securing an additional allocation of funds. The natural resource agencies will have an opportunity for brief updates today in a few minutes. And in August, we'll hear a longer presentation from these agencies about the projects that they are currently implementing. We will also hear a proposal from the agencies about how to invest about between $150,000 and $200,000 in remaining funds that have not yet been allocated, and how we might want to do that. So we'll be hearing more things, more detailed report at our August meeting. Now I'll turn things over to Liz. Liz is going to give an overview of the proposed process that she and the fund agencies have been developing for continuing to get ongoing input on how we should be using the funds, and then also some new products that the Department of Energy has developed to help better explain and educate folks on natural climate solutions and natural working lands, net carbon inventories. We'll hear an update on the timeline for deliverables, and then hear a brief update from the natural resource agencies, as I mentioned. So take it away, Liz.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Commissioners. For those of you who are newer to the Commission, I haven't spoken with the Commission in a few meetings. So my name is Liz Ruther, and I am the Senior Natural and Working Lands Policy Analyst, hired late last year with my colleague Jason Sauer to provide coordination, capacity, and technical support for the state's new nature-based mitigation effort. Next slide, please. Well, the chair mentioned the allocation did not materialize this year. It's important to be prepared for future allocations. At previous commission meetings this winter, we mentioned we were working in coordination with the agencies to clarify process and timelines between the commission, the agencies, and the governor's office. ODO and the agencies began in January and continued into the spring to clarify when and how the commission can expect to approach each year related to natural climate solutions topics broadly and fund activities specifically, as well as clarifying the steps the fund agencies will take together in coordination with the governor's office to offer a proposal to the commission in allocation years. We also worked on creating guidelines for proposals that are based on statute to guide proposal development. The table on this slide is a preview of the draft overall flow the commission can expect during a potential allocation year. This reflects the commission will have 4 touch points, 2 to discuss natural climate solutions topics broadly very early in the year, and 2 specifically to fund proposals later in the year. More to come on this topic and details, and the commission can expect to see a draft memo later this year after the annual report for the Natural and Working Lands Fund has been completed, which is due September 15th of each year. Next slide. So moving away from the topic of the fund, the chair mentioned the things I'll be talking with you about next, and moving into programmatic work. I wanted to update the commission on the Natural and Working Lands Advisory Committee that has been convened by the chair. We currently have 15 participants, and the committee has met 3 times and will convene again on July 25th. Folks not on the committee can go to the committee page for all the committee meeting materials, meeting recordings, and a link to listen into the meetings if they'd like to. This group is engaging, mission-driven, and earnest, and it's been a lot of fun starting to understand their breadth of knowledge and experience, and their recommendations have been really helpful, and we are just at the start. Early on, the group made the recommendation for the state to provide fact sheets for the inventory, how the ag sector is accounted for, and to discuss what NCS are generally. First versions are now complete, and we'll plop those in the chat for you all. We are slightly behind in our informal team target of having all the contracts signed within 6 months of our hire date. However, I am pleased to share with you that we have 2 fully executed contracts that will create foundational tools and information to help implement natural climate solutions across the state. The project leads are here with us today to talk about the work and dive a little bit into the details with you. They will each start working with the Natural Climate Solutions Interagency Working Group that consists of all the agencies listed in the statute next week. The chair will introduce each project team before they speak today. So I will not spend much time on that. We are so excited to have them with us and get the work started. The third and final RFP will be posted next week on Monday on Oregon Buys. As a reminder, or for those of you who are newer, this last RFP will identify existing agency programs that implement or could implement a suite of natural climate solutions specific to Oregon, as well as identify the metrics that are already in use in order to leverage existing program infrastructure and priorities as much as possible. The project will also result in recommendations for activity-based and community impact metrics if they don't already exist. It will also conduct a feasibility assessment to determine which natural climate solutions we can currently quantify a carbon benefit for based on currently available data and models. And we'll be going through this scope of work more in depth with the advisory committee at their July 25th meeting. Next slide.
Liz, before you leave this slide, I just
Okay.
want to make one comment. The reason that the advisory group was interested in a fact sheet on agricultural greenhouse gas emissions in particular is that they are partially accounted for in our sector-based emissions, and then partially the remainder is accounted for in land-based inventory. So it adds a little confusion, whereas the other land types are kind of fully accounted for in the land sector.
Yes, there's lots of nuance, and the contractor Greenhouse Gas Management Institute, which is here with us today, will help us navigate that complexity over the next few months. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Chair. Next slide, please. Okay, so with more concrete timeframes to work with for each project, we have drafted a revised schedule for the work to be completed by. Each colored cell on this table indicates tentative touch points with the Commission for various aspects of the work for each project. We are in the middle of planning engagement schedules with the 2 project teams on board right now, so this is definitely tentative, but wanted to kind of give you a visual. The work to complete Oregon's first generation land-based net carbon inventory is shown in blue and will be completed in December. The Natural Climate Solutions Workforce Needs Study in orange will provide a progress report to the legislature in September 15th and deliver the final product in December of this year as well. The non-binding goals that the Commission will establish to increase, lost my brain, to increase carbon sequestration and storage will occur in April 2026 in order to be able to take full advantage of all 3 products in decision making. The NCS and metrics work that I just spoke about is shown here in purple and planned to conclude in March 2026. Okay, so with that update, before we conclude this agenda item, we'd be happy to answer any questions, and then also, as the chair mentioned, open the floor to the Natural Climate Solutions agencies that are working on implementing the Natural Working Lands funds or are conducting other work relative to natural climate solutions. Let's see, trying to calculate how much time we have for that.
About 5 minutes.
Okay, just a few minutes. Okay, great, thank you.
Maybe I'll just jump in with a question if that's okay. Thank you so much for this presentation, and it's such an important issue. Maybe we'll just have to wait for the inventory, but One point of um, one point of confusion I often see with this topic is sort of the scale of reductions available. And I was wondering if there's any way you could provide some context to that before we have those numbers. And if not, that's fine.
The scale of potential
Scale of potential emissions reductions that
from
you
the
can
land sector.
achieve through this approach, kind of in the context of our overall challenge.
Why don't we come back to that when we talk about the land sector? There is some good preliminary information that we pulled together as part of the development of the Natural and Working Lands proposal. The Department of Forestry has done some great work, which is kind of the bulk of the potential in the state of Oregon. Our lands are already in most years sequestering quite a bit of carbon. That we can consider, but there are opportunities, and there's been some research on the potential to increase that. We made a recommendation for a target, and I believe it was about 9 to 11 million metric tons by 2050. So and that would be increased over what our natural and working lands are currently contributing. But we can come back to that and hear from some of the experts about how we should be thinking about that.
Great, thank you.
Any of the natural climate solutions agencies want to do an update? We will hear and focus in on a deeper discussion in August on this topic. Okay.
Alexa?
Yeah, hi, good morning. I'd be happy to provide an update if there's time.
Yes.
We can probably take a few minutes more on this topic. We'll have to maybe another 5 minutes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Good morning, Chair McDonald and commissioners. My name is Alexis Schmidt, and I'm Water and Climate Coordinator with OWEB. And so to provide just a brief update on where we are with the Natural and Working Lands funds, we received $2.25 million from the overall $10 million fund to distribute across 3 grant offerings. So one of these was the conservation management plans on agricultural land, and then restoration and technical assistance grant offerings. So we opened our applications in February and had a very positive response to this grant offering. We received a total request of $6.25 million, well exceeding what we have available and making this one of OWEB's more competitive grant offerings. And then in May, we held 3 technical review team meetings to evaluate those applications. One was for the Ag Heritage programs. So we received 8 applications, and the commission has recommended 5 projects for funding, totaling $752,000 across 38,000 acres of agricultural land. And then on the restoration and technical assistance side, we received 22 applications and held 2 review team meetings to review all of those applications. And we'll be recommending 6 projects, which range from riparian restoration to post-wildfire reforestation to oak understory projects. And then I would also note that these projects also have strong community co-benefits elements like wildfire resilience in a community disproportionately affected by fire in recent years, workforce development components for communities of color or at-risk youth, access to green spaces, demonstrations and technical assistance for landowners, as well as inclusion of traditional ecological knowledge. So the projects really have a great mix of ecological and social benefits. So just for the next steps, OWEB staff, myself, and Taylor Larson will be presenting the recommended projects to the board on our July 23rd board meeting. And then once those funding decisions have been made, we'll be kicking off projects with grantees. So just to conclude, I'm really excited about the level of enthusiasm we received for this offering, the range of projects and applicant types that we received, as well as the geographies that were represented throughout the state. And I'm looking forward to coming back to the commission with updates on implementation once those projects get going.
Thank you, Alexa. Anyone else, any other natural resource or natural climate solutions agency want to provide comments?
I can chime in real briefly.
Great, thank you, Danny.
This is Danny Norlander. I'm the Forest Climate Carbon and Health Analyst with the Oregon Department of Forestry. And I just wanted to quickly mention that we are starting to move along a little bit more swiftly with our projects, largely because of the ability to do some hirings recently, and the hopeful shuffling of positions around and whatnot should help out with being more successful here in the near term.
That's great to hear, Danny. Thank you. I just will note that one of the public comments we received, and I guess was also received by the Board of Forestry recently, was really asking for more information and on the challenges and barriers that ODF has faced in getting these funds out the door. And it's great to hear that you were able to hire and move some responsibilities around to make more headway. So we'll look forward to kind of a deeper discussion of that progress at our August meeting. So thank you.
We're also really excited to help out and work with the inventory project and the workforce project. We have a plethora of data that will be very useful there, I think. So.
Great. Thank you, Danny. And I have heard great things about the work you're doing with the Tualatin SWCD. I believe that's the SWCD.
Mm-hmm.
So I've heard great things about that. So congratulations on that. Great. Anyone else?
Hi, this is Kate Skinner with ODF as well. I just wanted to let you know the public comment we received. We're going to talk about it. Sounds like more in August here, but also it's an agenda item for our September Board of Forestry meeting as well. And so we're going to try to make sure we're sharing that a little more broadly with folks.
Great. Appreciate that. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, with that, I think we should move on to our next agenda item, and that is to hear from our consultants at Greenhouse Gas Management Institute about the work that they will be doing for us on development of our first land-based net carbon inventory. This was work that was directed to us to accomplish in House Bill 3409 from the 2023 session. And I want to just welcome the consultants from the Institute. I understand Olga Lyandris, is that how you pronounce your last name, is going to lead off on the presentation. So welcome to all of you.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me? Just a quick.
You're a little quiet, but we can hear you.
Okay, great. I will try to articulate better. Yes, thank you for the opportunity to join and present on this work. And good morning to the Commission and all the participants. My name is Olga Lyandris. I am a Senior Project Manager at the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute. And today I wanted to just give a quick overview of the scope of work for the greenhouse gas inventory for the Oregon natural and working lands that we will be working on and supporting the state with. This is also sometimes referred to as the land-based net carbon inventory. So I think there may be some, sometimes when we refer to it in one way or another, but we're referring to the same thing. And so let me first introduce the team. Next slide, please. I want to make it very clear that this It's not just me doing this. We have a great team of experts here, and some of them are on the call as well, so they can field any questions when we have a chance to discuss after the brief presentation. Katie Goldman will be, she's a fellow with GHGMI and will be kind of supporting the overall strategy and providing cross-cutting kind of oversight and direction and quality assurance to the project. She's a contributing author to the IPCC guidelines, so she has many years of experience in inventory development. Alyssa Benchamal is a colleague of mine at GHGMI, and she leads our software evaluation and program. So she will be kind of the data manager for the project. Anoop Joshi is a fellow with GHGMI and brings the forestry expertise and will be supporting the forestry and grasslands inventory component. Robert is also on the call. He is a principal at the Sierra View Solutions and will be supporting the croplands and grasslands component of the inventory. I will be kind of coordinating all of the team efforts and managing the project, as well as kind of contributing to the developed land component of the inventory. Carrie is not able to join today, but she is our managing director at GHGMI. Has worked for the state of Connecticut prior to coming to GHGMI, leading their climate action efforts. So, and as well as being a policy advisor to the U.S. Climate Alliance. So she kind of has a really great insights about state level work, and will help us out when we need it. Ash Mercer is our communications associate, so supporting the project when it comes to producing deliverables and making sure that all the information is clearly presented and communicated well to stakeholders. And last but not least, I wanted to introduce our partners at Sylvestrum Climate Associates. Steve Crooks is the principal there, and his team, Rebecca Brennis and Lena. Not sure the proper pronunciation of the last name, so I won't mingle it. So the Sylvestrum team will be bringing the blue carbon expertise to this project, and we're excited to work together to make this move forward. Next slide, please.
Olga, can I interrupt for a sec? This is Alan. I just wanted to reemphasize something that Olga said, which is this is really an all-star team. They pulled people from all over the country that were true experts in all of these different areas of natural working lands. And I think we're really fortunate to be able to have such an amazing crew of people working on this. I'm really excited about moving forward with this group.
And we worked with Sylvestrum when we were developing the natural and working lands proposal, and I agree, at least from experience with them, they do excellent work.
Thank you very much. Yes, and I forgot to mention Steve also is a contributing author to the IPCC guidelines. So for sure, the expertise within this group is stellar. So just to kind of summarize the kind of services and areas of expertise that GHGMI and the team brings to the table. We provide technical assistance and analytical services related to development and compilation of GHG inventories. We also kind of more broadly develop and implement carbon accounting frameworks, not only at the national or state level, but at enterprise level, project level. We also do a lot of capacity building and specialized training programs. In fact, that is kind of a very strong component of our mission, in not just to present the client with a technical report, but also make sure that they develop capacity to carry that kind of technical work forward themselves. We also provide solutions related to GHG data management and institutional arrangements. So what it takes to ensure that there's appropriate data that's collected, how it's managed, who is collecting it, who is sharing it, how, etc. We work across kind of all components of the MRV system design and implementation. MRV stands for measurement, reporting, and verification. You'll see that term creep up a lot probably. GHGMI also works on software evaluation and development for emission calculations. So we evaluate different tools and help develop different tools that entities use to do GHG accounting. Stakeholder engagement, facilitation of public consultations, of course, is a component of work in this sector. And then GHGMI has an education program that offers online courses and diplomas for climate change professionals. So there's also an opportunity to kind of grow the skill set for the partners that we work with through that element. And so just to kind of summarize, our team has over 15 years of experience providing consulting services to municipal, state, and national governments related to GHG inventories. And this includes work supporting 9 U.S. states and natural working lands so far, and to align their methodologies and approaches with national and international inventory standards and guidelines. So currently we're working in New Jersey on a very similar initiative. And I know that partners on our team have supported Minnesota and Maryland, currently supporting Massachusetts, I believe, as well as Washington State in very similar efforts. So we can also, you know, all the lessons learned from that work will come to bear here as well. Next slide, please. So just quickly, what are the project objectives for the next several months that we have? The first one is to develop a framework and supporting resources to enable Oregon to inventory emissions and removal from the state's natural and working lands. And the second is to compile Oregon's first natural and working land greenhouse gas inventory. With that, the state will be able to carry this work forward in the future cycles, inventory cycles. Next slide, please. I wanted to mention the GHG accounting principles that are kind of outlined in the IPCC guidelines, and we follow when we do our work, so that the inventories that we and the framework around them that we produce is done with integrity and sufficient rigor. So there's 5 of these principles, and maybe some of you are familiar with them, but I'll just run through them quickly to emphasize their importance. Transparency is, ensuring that there's sufficient clear documentation so that everybody understands how the inventory was compiled, what assumptions were made, etc. Accuracy, of course, ensures that the inventory contains neither over nor under estimates to the best of our judgment as the inventory is compiled. Completeness focuses on producing estimates that are, compiled for all relevant categories of sources and sinks and gases. So we're gonna try to be as complete as possible as the data availability allows in this effort. The 4th principle is consistency. So as far as possible, we should be calculating emissions and removals using the same methods and data sources for all years so that we can see, trends over time. And then comparability refers to the idea that the inventory is reported in ways that allow it to be compared to other inventories. In this case, maybe there's interest in seeing how other states are doing, or compared to the national inventory, and some of the estimates that are produced by US EPA. All right, so with that said, next slide, please. I can talk a little bit about the timeline and the project overview. We're kind of thinking about this in two phases. Phase one is between now and September to develop the technical approach, identify all the available data and document data gaps. Then have a first round of stakeholder consultations to present that approach and make sure that we gather all the information from the interagency working group and the advisory committee regarding what kind of data may be available, and kind of gather input on the technical approaches, and then putting all of that together, drafting the inventory analysis and the technical manual. The technical manual will be sort of that document that describes the step-by-step approach that is used in producing the inventory estimates. The phase two will be from October to December to then implement this approach. Once we have the draft inventory completed, we will do another round of stakeholder consultations to share the results and make sure that we are interpreting the results accurately and making any needed, gathering input to make any needed refinements. There will also be a public input webinar at that time. And then once we gather all the input from the stakeholders and the public, we will finalize the inventory and the technical approach manual and produce an inventory report, which will be kind of a narrative report describing the inventory results and explaining the trends that we see through that. Next slide, please. So what will the inventory include, and what is the kind of the methodological approach? We are aiming to align our approach with the IPCC guidelines and the National Greenhouse Gas Inventory land sector methodologies. This inventory will account for all the land in the state, and the inventory is supposed to account for all managed land in the state, and it is assumed that all land in Oregon is managed. We're going to be accounting for emissions and removals due to carbon stock changes on the lands, on the different categories of lands, as well as some non-CO2 emissions specific to each of the land categories. So I'll give some examples of that in the following slides. We will also aim to categorize all the lands in Oregon to match the IPCC categories, again, to align kind of the accounting methodologies and approaches. And then methodological selection will be based on a tiered approach, following kind of the IPCC guidelines as well. So there's 3 tiers. Tier 1, where we can use default emission parameters if data specific to Oregon or US even is not available. Tier 2 approach ensures that there are more location-specific emission parameters that reflect better conditions in Oregon if the data is available. And Tier 3 then moves into kind of biogeochemical modeling and tools like that to estimate emissions. So I think we'll probably end up with a combination of all these different tiers in the inventory, depending on what kind of data is available, depending on the significance of the category, and what tools and models are available and calibrated for Oregon. Next slide, please. So the land categories, according to the IPCC kind of framework, include the ones that you see listed here. There's forest land, and that is land with woody vegetation that's consistent with some thresholds used to define forest land, or it's land that has vegetation that will reach such thresholds. So this may include tree size or, a minimum contiguous area with particular characteristics. So areas that may have been burned that lost vegetation would still be included here if the vegetation is expected to come back. Again, we can use the National Inventory definition for forest lands, which is consistent with the U.S. Forest Service definition, but we'll also consider, if the state has its own definition that differs, we'll make some decisions about which definition will be most applicable. Croplands are all the lands used for cropping and agroforestry. And again, for agroforestry, there will have to be some rules about what counts as agroforestry if it doesn't fall within the forest land definition. Grasslands include rangelands and pasture lands. So this may include savannas and natural rangelands where grazing occurs, as well as land that's kind of managed more closely as pasture land. Again, all these definitions, I'm only providing very high level definitions right now, but the specifics will be discussed and documented. Wetlands are all land that is covered or saturated by water. So there will be further disaggregation by tidal and non-tidal wetlands, and some decisions about where forested wetlands are accounted for. In the national inventory, they are accounted under forest lands, but we'll have to see what data is available and how detailed it is to be able to account it here or under forest.
We're getting to close to the end of your time, so you might just consider that, and you may not need to kind of go through all of these types.
Okay, sounds good. It just two more left, and they're shorter. So developed land is all land where there are settlements. This is what's referred as settlements under IPCC, and other land includes bare soil, rock, and ice. And emissions are assumed to be negligible, so usually not estimated. The main point here is that the land sector inventory accounts for all land, right? And so we need to make sure over time that this is consistent in the inventory. Next slide. Maybe I will skip that one in the interest of time. But yes, next one, please. Yeah, so for each land category, I also wanted to point out this kind of concept of land transitions. And so under forest land, we're looking at land that has been forest, and then land that is converted to forest. And that is the same for all land categories. The default transition time under IPCC guidelines is 20 years. So we're going to be trying to see what data is available to be able to track these transitions over the relevant time periods to properly account for the carbon dynamics as the land transitions. So there are carbon fluxes from relevant carbon pools that are accounted for each land category. So in forests, for example, it's biomass primarily. In croplands, we will be focusing more on soil carbon pools. And then the non-CO2 emissions that we are talking about are things that, emissions that come from fire, so methane and nitrous oxide emissions, fertilizer use that occurs on croplands, as well as maybe in forests or developed areas. There's also wetland methane emissions and methane and nitrous oxide emissions from drained organic soil. So depending on which of these activities may be occurring on different land categories, they'll be also accounted for in the inventory. Aquaculture, if it occurs in Oregon. For the one thing I'd like to point out is regarding fertilizer use. So we will be coordinating with DEQ, which compiles the sectoral inventory, and I think currently accounts for fertilizer use in agricultural settings, and kind of discussing and deciding on what is the best way forward in terms of where this should be accounted for. So that there's no double counting and everything is transparently documented and yeah, reported. The next series of slides is really a more detailed breakdown of each of the categories in which gases we expect to account for related to them. And so I suppose in the interest of time, we'll have to skip that, but it is available for your review if you would like to take a look. And I just wanted to note that this is kind of a complete list, but not all categories may be estimated in the end. You know, if some are deemed to be of lower significance, they don't contribute a lot, or if they may not be occurring, or we aren't able to estimate them due to data limitations. So all of that will be noted in the technical manual document, and rationale is provided for why either category isn't estimated. Can we skip the next series of slides to get to the scope of the technical manual, please? In addition to the data and methodology, the technical manual will include some of the cross-cutting elements that provide the framework around the inventory process. So this will include institutional arrangements. So these are kind of documentation of who compiles the data, who manages the data, who shares the data, who does what kind of processing to the data before it goes to the compilation team. Data methodology is the technical component. This will also include QA/QC procedures, key category analysis, which helps prioritize improvements. Will include some information about the archiving system, as well as the inventory improvement plan, so that with each cycle, improvements can be identified, prioritized, and implemented. Is something that is another kind of principle of the IPCC guidelines, that we're not going to have a perfect inventory the first time around, and this is something that continues to improve over time as your data is collected and new methodologies developed. Next slide, please. Just to give everybody here an idea of what kind of data is needed for this effort. Primarily, the activity data involves land use data over a period of the inventory, so 1990 to 2024, or whatever the most recent year that will be included in the inventory, by land type, and then further disaggregation of land categories that's based on climate zone, soil type, vegetation type, hydrology, cropping systems, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, documenting transitions between these land categories is going to be really important. For cropland, we'll also be looking for information on agricultural practices such as tillage, residue management, soil inputs, et cetera. For coastal wetlands, salinity will be an important piece of data as an input. burn areas, of course, will be critical to estimate emissions from wildfires and prescribed burns, and then aquaculture production if it occurs in the state. So we'll be working with the interagency working group and the team at Odo to identify existing data sets. And we will prefer to use state level data if it's available, but there are also national data sets on forests and croplands that we can rely on if state level data is not available. I think that is my last slide. So we can probably then take whatever time is remaining for some discussion, Q&A, and the
Thank you,
team.
Olga. Really appreciate the overview of how you're approaching the project and the team that's going to be working on it. I'll open it up first to questions from commissioners and agency directors. If any, and help me with hands raised if I don't see them. It's a little hard in this system. Okay. Well, perhaps folks are getting their thoughts together from commissioners. We did get one question in the chat, and that was a question about whether the IPCC forest land category accounts for different subtypes, and it's really focused on, rather than different forest types, it looks like it's focused on forest land use designations and ownership types. And I know the Department of Forestry did take that closer look, but I guess the question to you is whether or not you are also going to be kind of looking at the inventory for forests in that detail where you'll parse out kind of ownership and designation.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I can take a stab, and then Anoop maybe will also can add. Whatever data is available to help us disaggregate further by forest group types or other kind of subcategories, which will help improve the accuracy. So if you could disaggregate based on, for example, deciduous, coniferous, and mixed forests, or go more detailed if the data is available. Ownership, it doesn't usually factor into the disaggregation, but more of a ecological characteristics that dictate growth rates and carbon densities for those types of forests.
Great, thank you. Bettina?
Hi.
Commissioner Von.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to this. It sounds it'll be very intriguing. Two questions. One is the IPCC land use categories. Is tribal lumped with other categories, or is it separate?
Yeah, it doesn't differentiate between ownership at all. It focuses primarily on vegetation and management characteristics, so the tribal lands aren't usually part of the definition.
So sorry, I guess you just answered that previously. So the analysis will not be broken down by ownership type?
Not under the this particular scope of work, but this can be something that is an additional analysis that can be completed later on, I believe, if it's a priority for the state.
Commissioner Von Hagen, I would recommend that you take a look at the report that the Department of Forestry did and published in, is that 2018? Flanagan,
Yeah.
and Forster Skinner, because that did break things out, and that did, as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, combine tribal and private together.
Yeah, no, thank you. I am remembering that study, and curious why, just given the difference in policies, for different landowners, that would be appropriate, why that's not being considered here in the first blush.
Well, Commissioner Von Hagen, I think the intent is to have kind of this be the overarching look across all land types and be kind of equivalent to how EPA has been handling the national inventory, which doesn't disaggregate. It just looks at each kind of overarching land type. So we were directed to be kind of consistent in our approach with that. As was said earlier, we can certainly continue to take on additional work, or the Department of Forestry, I think, has been interested in continuing to do periodic looks, like the work that was done in 2018, that did kind of take that more specific look using the FIA data in particular.
Great, thank you. And then just one final question. Is this what is the, and if you said this, I apologize. What is the temporal period of analysis?
Yeah, I believe I need to confirm this with the team, but I believe the inventory start is 1990, and then it will go through the most recent data set that's available. I would hope we can get it to all the way through 2024. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Dotson, did you want to ask anything else related to your original question?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. And I think this is going to be a really useful resource to have when it's completed. I do. One quick question that just follows up on the last question. Are we obscuring the information about ownership as we go through this process? In other words, will the process necessarily have to examine or quantify various ownership types and then consolidate that into the categories the IPCC uses so that we're actually obscuring that information? Or does that information not actually get collected as part of this analysis? Does that question make sense?
It does make sense, Commissioner Dotson. If I may step in and then others can add. Because this is really kind of looking at all lands within the borders of the state of Oregon, it really doesn't get into land use. It's not collected based on land ownership. It is based on land use or land use changes and other factors that affect carbon, like areas of wildfire and it also, the IPCC and EPA methods consider carbon stocks in harvested wood products as well. So it does, but it doesn't look at ownership.
Gotcha. Thank you, Chair McDonald. I appreciate that. And then my previous question, the information that you gave, which maybe there's nothing more to add at this point, but it sounds like in excess of 10% of the state's emissions, we could be looking at additional offsets here, which is significant. Does that seem correct?
Yes. Yes, I believe so. Commissioner Thorndike. Oh, we can't hear you. You might be on mute, although you don't. Yeah, you are on mute.
Specific though, the inventory will be, so if you can go to a particular piece of property and determine what it's shown in the inventory, correct? Or for rough parameters?
Well, The spatial resolution, the spatial resolution of the available data will dictate the spatial resolution of the emission estimates. I don't think that it will be able to, you know, point to a particular parcel of land and say this is what's being emitted here. And really,
ownership, you could go backwards to, you know, on some scale at least, to determine ownership or whatever you think.
I think if, considering the use of remote sensing, if you knew where a piece of property was, you could potentially use the remotely sensed information. But in general, again, this inventory is intended to really look within the borders of Oregon and consider land use change through time as the primary input. So
I'll pipe in too and just say that the inventory itself, like the tool, is a set of spreadsheets with a lot of math and equations and formulas within it. So it's not a spatial output. So the state could, if we wanted to, or if the commission wanted to see a future product where it's like, oh, we're really interested in like spatial viewing and like a tool for landowners to calculate, or other kind of tools like that are spatially oriented for communication, for assessment, for use. That is something that's kind of like the next step. That's something we'd love to talk with the commission about.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it seems like that'd be useful. Second kind of question, and I think it was pointed out, is I just read a recent story talking about some studies that were done up in the Olympic Peninsula that discovered, for instance, a lot of unknown bog environment in the forest, and it turns out that had a radically, I mean, different sort of sequestration effect. I mean, it was very effective, and they didn't even know about it. And you know, this was found by people, you know, University of Washington folks traipsing through the forest, kind of, you know, doing transects, and so, you know, that kind of data, as that comes up, it sounds like there is some sort of feedback loop to update the overall inventory.
Absolutely. In fact, we're in touch with those researchers because we're very interested in their methods. Yeah. And so that's an excellent point.
Great, thanks. That's it.
Commissioner Von Hagen?
Yeah, sorry to keep on this point. So I was curious about the data source. Is FIA data going to be used, or is it a remote sensing technique? And does it get informed by FIA data? I'm just curious how the data is not spatial in either case.
The product is not spatial, but there are spatial data sets that inform the work. So FIA data and other spatial data that are like people going out into the field, you know, and doing what FIA analysts do. That, yes. So like similar to FIA data, yes. But the inventory itself does not have, like, the product that we'll be making for this effort will not have like a spatial communication tool associated with it. Although we could make a series of maps depending on like to relay certain points or findings.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and we do, of course, I think the FIA data will be an important component of information about the emission parameters for the forest lands, but the spatial data will tell us where the forests are, what kind they are, etc. So both will be needed for doing these types of estimates.
I note that one of your colleagues put some additional thoughts into the chat, but I think we're going to need to move to our next agenda item. So I think, you know, this maybe we can come back at our next meeting and kind of dig into this a little bit more as we now that we kind of have some of the basics covered, kind of get at some of the questions that were raised, because they were great questions. So thanks to all the commissioners and others that are digging into this, and I'm excited about it too. I think that there's a lot that we can learn from this. So with that, I'll suggest we go to our next agenda item, and we're going to be hearing from Jeff Crook and some of our consultants from SSG, and we're really lucky to have them as the consulting firm that we worked with on the first analysis and forecast. And it's great to see you, Chris, and Yul again. And I'm just super excited that we're able to work with you. These forecasts are really an important way to inform our work. And so the funding that the legislature provided to us to keep our forecast up to date is really a great investment in the commission's ability to do our job. So really great. It's great to see this update and to learn a little more about that. So I think I'm turning it over to Chris and Yul.
I'm actually Chair McDonald.
I'm sorry, to Jeff, to you first.
Okay, I'm going to kick this off with a few slides.
Yes.
So hi everybody, I'm Jeff Crook. I'm the Senior Climate Policy Analyst with ODO. And I'm here to introduce the TIGR project, which is the Transformational Integrated Greenhouse Gas Emissions Reduction Project. It's the project with the long name and the fun acronym. So this project was introduced to the Commission earlier this year, but we're now at a place where we have our contractor SSG on board and the project is underway. As Chair McDonald noted, SSG conducted the original TIGR modeling work. And so we've got a lot of continuity and experience with this team and the modeling approach, and we're really pleased to be working with them again. So I'm going to walk through a few slides. Next slide, please. So since we have several new members on the commission since the last TIGR model run, we felt it would be helpful to provide some context around where we've been as far as the original findings. So the first TIGR project was produced for the commission to develop and analyze actions across the economy to achieve Oregon's sector-based greenhouse gas emissions reduction goal of at least 45% below 1990 levels by 2035. So this project included a detailed forecast of emissions and an assessment of existing programs and regulations out to 2035. The analysis also considered additional opportunities or actions to reduce emissions. Next slide, please. So the original TIGR was a multi-year process, which was funded through a U.S. Climate Alliance grant and was led by an ODO project manager and our modeling consultant, SSG. The engagement process with TIGR occurred over the course of 3 public meetings and coordination with our state agency partners. The commission was on point to review work products and field public comments and did this over 15 commission and subcommittee meetings, all of which helped to scope and establish the TIGR modeling framework. Next slide, please. So as far as findings from the first TIGR, the report found that the state's existing climate actions, which were 15 programs and regulations adopted, including the federal CAFE standards, would enable the state to reach the 2035 emissions reduction goal if they are all implemented as planned and fully funded. And there are 2 what we call big lever programs that would reduce most all of the emissions that we need to meet our 2035 goal. And these are House Bill 2021, which is the 100% clean energy requirements, and the Climate Protection Program. Next slide, please. So this slide shows those programs and regulations adopted that were analyzed as part of the first TIGR. I'm not seeing, maybe click again. Here they come. And I'm not going to talk through all of these, just to kind of note that most of them were DEQ programs and rules, including the CPP on the left side of the screen here, and other energy incentive and other climate programs on the right side. And these slides will be available after the meeting for folks who want to view. Next slide, please. Additional findings. The TIGR also analyzed and recommended an additional 35 actions that could help accelerate meeting the state's 2035 emissions reduction goal by the year 2030. These are known as the TIGR actions. And the results showed significant financial and co-benefits from these additional actions. Importantly, the TIGR analysis directly informed the Commission the roadmap to 2030. This report was put out in 2023. And this included a suite of recommendations to the legislature and was largely focused on the importance of continuing support for full funding and implementation of the state's climate programs. Next slide. So why TIGR 2.0? This is a technical analysis and update, and it responds to legislative direction that we periodically prepare a detailed emissions reduction forecast. And so using the same modeling framework, the project will assess progress over the past 3 years to reduce emissions through state and federal actions and programs. We'll update the emissions forecast through 2050. And the update will consider new inputs and realities, such as the growth of data centers, and will assess progress and impacts from new programs and investments. In addition, it will evaluate new actions to achieve quantifiable emission reductions out to 2050 and those projected statewide co-benefits. And importantly, it will inform future climate policy and program actions. Next slide, please. So for our timeline, we've got data collection and meetings with state agencies underway to go over new inputs and assumptions for use in the model. We anticipate bringing the project back to consult with the Commission later this fall to share findings and results. And there will also be public comment opportunity around that same time with some details still to be developed. And the final report is due December 31st of this year. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Yul Herbert from SSG, and he's going to walk into some more details about the project.
Thank you, Jeff. And very great to be back here again. TIGR 1.0 was one of our favorite projects ever, and it was really great to work closely with the Commission on that. And I see a number of members who are familiar from that effort. So if you can go to the next slide, I will give you, for some people it'll be a reminder, and for some it'll be some new information, but I'll just give you a bit more detail on how we approach modeling greenhouse gas emissions from Oregon. So just if you keep going to the next slide, a little bit of information about us. We're a workers' cooperative. We're spread across Canada, US, and Chile, and then a couple of members elsewhere in Latin America, with about 35 worker members, and then a few other staff to about 48 in total. If you go to the next slide, please. We've been working in this area for 20 plus years, and we're definitely passionate about this work and always trying to improve, and we'll be able to make some improvements since TIGR 1.0 and 2.0. And we've worked on many of these types of analysis for jurisdictions of all sizes, including some municipalities in Oregon, other states, and sometimes national level analysis as well. If you go to the next slide, I'll just give you a bit of background on our modeling philosophy, and on to the next one. So we use a paradigm called systems dynamics, which has its roots in ecosystem modeling. And we, as an inverse of a microscope, which tries to understand very small things, we try to understand very big things, which are complex. So you can think of us, of the modeling approach as really a macroscope, which is trying to understand how all parts of a system fit together and how they interrelate and how there's feedback between them. If you go to the next slide, this is an example of the way we represent the feedback. through a systems dynamics graphical illustration. This is the convention that's used in this paradigm. This example is chickens. And chickens can produce eggs, which can lead to more chickens. But if they're near a road, they may cross that road, which would lead to less chickens. And so you can see how the feedbacks play out between something that might increase the population of the chickens and something that might decrease it. And so that's an illustration of the way in which we define relationships within an energy system. If you go to the next slide. And we do this with a lot of detail. So the model is bottom up. So we're looking at all the activities within Oregon that drive energy and emissions. So people making trips and what they're using to make those trips with, whether it's a bicycle or transit or a vehicle, which has different implications for energy and emissions. The systems dynamics paradigm is not derived from history. So it's a very exploratory paradigm. And that means we can look at transformation, which is a critical element in the energy transition because we're looking at futures which are very different from our history. The modeling framework is also transparent. So we track all of the formulas and data sets within the model so that those who wish to could look at the modeling framework and see how it's all put together. We also look at economic inputs and or impacts rather, and I'll show those in a second. And in the systems dynamics paradigm, economic impacts are outputs. So they are not driving the projections, but they are the result of the projections. We generate public health impacts and also consider equity. And I'll talk a little bit about how we do that in a second. If you go to the next slide. This is a schematic of the energy system and all the different dimensions that we consider, as well as some parts which are not energy-related emissions, like agriculture, forestry, and land use, and waste, which also have emissions impacts, but they're non-energy related. And within the model, all these pieces fit together in a coherent overview of Oregon. And we calibrated this model for 1.0, and we're in the process of updating that calibration for TIGR 2.0. If you keep going to the next slide. So one of the important elements of this model is that it's spatial. And so we've represented Oregon in terms of counties, as well as some smaller zones, so that we can track all of the impacts. We'll first calibrate the model and its energy system at the level of this spatial disaggregation, but then we can track all the changes within space. So in TIGR 1.0, we reported on how energy emissions and activities that drive energy emissions changed annually at the level of this space. And that's actually available in a dashboard. Next slide. So just to give you a sense of the types of results that we generate, keep on going. This is a diagram that really tells the whole story in one picture. On the left-hand side, or the y-axis, you see greenhouse gas emissions. Along the x-axis, you see years, beginning in, say, 2021 to 2050. And then along at the y-axis, there's a dot that says current emissions level. That's the greenhouse gas emissions inventory, or the last calibration. We calibrate the model against the latest GHG inventory. We then do a reference scenario. We're actually doing several reference scenarios, but one that really holds most things constant. So most technologies constant, but we build in population change and employment change. And then we look at all the different actions that reduce emissions as wedges. So those are the colored areas, and you saw an earlier version of this that Jeff presented. And then what you get is the area under the curve, which is the remaining emissions. It's dotted in this chart, and we call that the carbon liability, but that's really what we're trying to optimize for minimizing. We're trying to reduce that as much as possible, in addition to looking at point-in-time targets, 2050 and 2035 and so on. If you go to the next slide, we look at a lot of different financial implications of each of the wedges or actions or measures, as you saw in the previous slide. we track capital expenditures for each change within the system. So as we're adding an electric vehicle, that has an incremental capital cost, or if we're doing a retrofit of a home, that might have an incremental capital cost. So we track all those year over year, and also the flow of cost savings or increased operational costs that result from that capital investment, which in this case is represented by the yellow bars and as energy savings, and the dark blue bars as operations and maintenance changes. And so then you get an annual net cost or net saving, which in these charts is represented by that black line. And you can sum it up over the period to calculate the net present value. You can also look at the abatement cost of each of the actions. And you can look at a number of other economic indicators, which we can also explore in more detail. Go to the next slide. I mentioned a dashboard. We present all the results on an interactive dashboard, which allows anyone to essentially dive into more detail by sector, by fuel type, by end use. And there's different elements of the dashboard that explore the data spatially using Sankey diagrams, which is one of our favorite visualizations. And you can also use pivot tables to explore the data in a more custom way. And the next slide. So the process that we're using this time, if you keep going, we're well into meeting with all the different agencies right now to understand current and updated policies since TIGR 2.0. And the blue balls or blue circles here are outputs. Orange circles are meetings, and then green circles are tasks or technical analysis that we're undertaking. And so we're midway through this trajectory on these screens, where we're calibrating the model and updating TIGR 1.0 model inputs. We are also coordinating with the state energy strategy, both to understand differences and similarities between those modeling approaches. And then we'll be generating updated forecasts with more of an emphasis on 2050 than the short-term period from the last one. And then looking at health impacts using a COBRA model from EPA. If we keep going to the next slide, we will then be sharing those results, adding new actions if we need them, and doing more model runs, and then presenting the overall results to all of you and as well as to others before feeding into the draft report in the fall. So that's a rapid fire overview of the trajectory of the project. And if we keep going, that's it.
Thank you, Yul. I really appreciate that. We'll open it up now for questions from commissioners. Commissioner Dodson.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. This is going to be a great tool, I can see. Two quick questions. The first one is obviously the reconciliation bill that was just enacted will create changes, and there's also some additional uncertainty about some of the other standards, specifically Advanced Clean Cars 2. And so my question is, how are those changes or potential changes in policy going to be incorporated into this? Maybe I'll just leave it there. I have a second question too.
Thank you, Commissioner Dodson. Great question. Staff want to field that?
Go ahead, Yul.
So yeah, so I can respond. So we will be doing two reference scenarios, business as usual, in which we don't really include any policies, and then a business as planned, which includes funded. I can't. These were your definitions, Alan. If you remember them, but we will reflect the changes as a result of the new reconciliation bill within that BAP. So we'll capture how that may slow down emissions reductions in different sectors.
Yeah, so specific part of the scope of work of this project is to look at the impact of changes in federal policy. And so we'll be doing some sensitivity analysis on those different policies, whether that be um, loss of tax credits or loss of funding for incentives, or the ones related to Advanced Clean Cars 2. We'll be looking at those to see how they impact what we need to be able to do to meet our goals. Having said all that, to meet our state goals, the two big lever programs that Jeff mentioned with the slide are the CPP and HB 2021, both of which are actually not megawatt targets or greenhouse gas ton targets, they're percentages. So to the degree that we still have to meet that goal. For the investor-owned utilities, it's 100% of renewables by 2040, and with the CPP, it's 90% reduction on most of the fossil fuels by 2050. So the modeling will show success of meeting those goals, because we're modeling success as we did in TIGR 1.0. But what that means on our path to get to success is that the trajectory of how we need to get there is going to steepen and make it harder, because there's going to be probably less acquisition in the early years associated with, because of the lack of funding from the feds and the lack of partnership from the feds. In the end, we still have to meet those two requirements by law. So we're going to model that. How we get there is going to be impacted by.
Great. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. And one thing I would just flag for you to consider is that there's some things that are going to be certain, like, we know that there will not be a consumer EV tax credit after a certain date here coming up soon. And then we don't know on advanced clean cars, because we don't know the outcome of litigation, exactly how that's going to go. And so I think nuancing that and communicating that clearly will be a challenge. I hope you can do that. My second question was just
the ones that are the sensitivities we're going to do are going to be the ones on the uncertainties.
Got it. Thank you. Terrific.
And one extra point on that: when we did those kind of sensitivities for the Oregon State Energy Strategy, what we found was deviating from that least cost path, which includes all of that, makes it more expensive to achieve our goals. And my guess is that when we do that sensitivity here, it's also going to show the same thing and make it harder to get there.
That makes sense. And then I just throw my other one out on the table, which is I feel like in the past year or so, there's been a real blurring between data centers and crypto mining in the way people have looked at these facilities. And I was wondering, obviously you're doing a ground up analysis in this, and I'm wondering if you think you'll have a clear sense, or are we seeing dual function facilities that are going to be used for both of these things? And I think that the public policy response could be really different if it's a data center versus a crypto mining, and I think understanding that in this analysis could be useful. So I just throw that question out too.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We haven't really delved into the crypto mining part of it as much. But again, this TIGR 2.0 is going to be consistent with the assumptions associated with the Oregon State Energy Strategy. We're actually going to borrow them, make sure that they're pretty much the same. Different models, different way of doing it, but we'll make them sure that they're consistent. In that state energy strategy, we chose to do the analysis. We chose to use the analysis done by Northwest Power Planning and Conservation Council on what they thought was going to be the loads in Oregon and in the Northwest from data centers. I don't know if cryptocurrency is involved in that. I kind of don't think so, but I'll double check on that and get back to you all. That's a very good question. But we used that. And when we did that analysis, when we were trying to figure out what the portfolio would be to meet the need, we immediately went to the medium forecast for data center loads that are being forecast by the council, the Power Council, when we went to public input, they said, you should really use the medium high one, because if that's probably a better one to do a plan on. So we actually ended up using the medium high forecast for data center loads. Whether or not all that ends up showing up, when Director Benner and I were at NASIO, every state had similar kinds of curves, and obviously that's not going to happen. So they're shopping it, and we'll find out where all that lands. But we're planning on the medium high. We'll use that in Tigger 2.0 as well. But I'll get back to you on the crypto.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Dobson. That's a great, I've been reading studies about the kind of different types of data centers. I hadn't really thought about, the different policy implications of the different types of data centers and maybe related. And my impression was that to some extent they often get lumped, but to your point, they're pretty different, both in terms of energy use, but also, policy response. It's a really great point. So thank you. Other questions or comments?
McDonald, I'll chime in.
Great, Commissioner Apter.
Great. Yeah, just echoing thanks for this update. Super excited that this work is getting underway and really thrilled the SSG team's back on board. Excited to work with you all again. I think kind of building off Greg's question, Commissioner Dobson's questions, as I think folks are all familiar, but I know we have some newer commissioners, the Tigger 1.0 and the resulting roadmap to 2030 found that, with strong implementation, Oregon's existing climate policies would enable the state to achieve our existing goals of reducing emissions at least 45% below 1990 levels by 2035, but really underscored that implementation piece. And as we were just talking through, unfortunately, there have been some pretty significant challenges and delays to implementing our existing cornerstone policies and programs, including the big lever programs, HB 2021 and Climate Protection Program. But as we were just talking about, ACT, ACC2, and not just federal rollbacks to funding for key programs, but state rollbacks in terms of not continuing funding for the, heat pump incentive programs or CREP, et cetera. So I'm just curious about opportunities through this process to focus on how do we address and overcome those barriers to achieve strong implementation of the programs we already have on the books. And I am really eager and always interested to dig into what are those additional new policy actions and how do we look forward to the 2050 target as well. But just thinking and considering the significant backsliding at the state and federal level on our climate progress and implications for achieving our 2035 goal, I'm just wondering about how, again, we might really dig into what are those barriers and what are the corresponding actions and recommendations to staying on track. And then curious if you could say more about what I think I heard around potentially a larger focus on 2050 as opposed to the interim goal.
Thank you, Commissioner Apter.
A couple of comments in response. One is the barriers and the pathways and the recommendations to meet our goals are really the focus of the Oregon State Energy Strategy work that we're doing right now and coming towards the finalization of. So that one actually has a set of strategies, policies, and actions that actually overcome the barriers and put us on the path to meeting our energy objectives and greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. So this plays along with that, and they want them to be consistent. This one isn't specifically going to address the barriers. That's more in the state energy strategy. But when we do this, we want, like I said before, the assumptions to be pretty much the same so that they're consistent. But we're also in this one, it's a different type of model. We're tracking what actions we've done and what the trajectory we need to be on with an updated forecast that has that data center load and other kind of factors in or imported into it so that it updates it. So we may or may not meet our 2035 goal as we did in Tigger in 2035 as we did in Tigger 1.0. So if we don't, there'll be a gap. We'll have to look at that. And then this one also will look at the 2050 and whether or not we meet our goals with the existing programs and regulations that we have already adopted. If not, then we'll have to do that gap analysis. So there's kind of if you think of Tigger 2.0, in part A is the update of the forecast, figure out how much we've done, what accomplishments we've occurred, and how close we are on trajectory to meet our goals. And then part B is if we don't meet those goals, how do we fill that gap? And so we'll be getting into some of the things, Commissioner Abner, that you're talking about. What are the things that we want to do that? In doing that analysis, we'll be looking at the things that were showed to us in the state energy strategy as a helpful guide. So again, that gap analysis will be consistent with what we did in the state energy strategy.
Commissioner,
so they're going to go kind of hand in glove.
Commissioner Apter, I think, you really identified what I think is really critical work for this commission to be doing, which is really having that conversation, hearing from folks that are trying to achieve those individual goals or, where we're seeing new barriers and challenges and thinking about how do we best address that and make sure that the recommendations that we make as a commission and the activities that we take on as a commission are focused in on addressing those barriers and challenges and taking advantage of new opportunities that might be coming up. So a great way to kind of focus much of our attention going forward.
Chair McDonald, could I add to that?
Yes, please. Yeah.
One other value in part A that Alan described is that we're updating the calibration. And when we do that, we'll see how a bunch of the drivers of emissions and energy consumption have changed. Like, is VMT going up across the board, vehicle miles traveled, or what are heat pump installation rates looking like in different geographies, or all of the sort of indicators of progress we'll be looking at between the two calibrations, which I think could be a really rich data set in itself to understand where progress is moving forward and where there are significant challenges. So that, like, sort of a bit under the hood of the emissions, a bit deeper down to look at some of those kind of indicators.
Great, thank you, Yul. Any last questions or comments?
Yes, Chair McDonald.
Yes, please.
Hi, Gabriella Goldfarb, Environmental Public Health Section Manager at the Oregon Health Authority. Director Hoppe wasn't able to be here today. I wanted to flag, just as food for thought, an issue that I think you'll remember during Tigger 1.0 OHA would flag, which was that the use of the COBRA model, which is, especially particulate emissions and how the pollution reductions benefit health, which is fantastic. And air quality is such a strong, or the reductions in emissions, air emissions are such a strong health co-benefit. But for Oregon specifically, the flag that we provided was, how do you tie the benefits to interventions that help other areas where Oregon spends money, namely the Oregon Health Plan. So the benefits that COBRA calculates are calculated broadly across all of our citizens, all of our residents, right? But the state pays considerable amounts specifically to those populations who are least resilient to climate impacts. And so it may be that in looking for ways to support funding, for example, heat pump programs, and to the degree those programs generally are prioritized to those populations, you're going to see healthcare reduction costs. Now, totally get, understood that we couldn't, that wasn't possible in Tigger 1.0, may not be possible in Tigger 2.0 either. But I just wanted as food for thought for people to recognize that a more fine scale analysis, if that were ever possible, and the commission flagged the need for studies like that or approaches like that, could help inform policymakers' decisions about supporting. If you could tie these kinds of investments, you may be able to get more support. The cost benefit changes. So I just, especially because we have new commissioners on board, I just wanted to raise that concept here.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriella. That was a big part of some of the conversations that we had in Tigger 1.0. And I think my impression is that it won't be possible in this update, but correct me if I'm wrong, Alan. But I think, what would be really helpful would be to have kind of how would we go about doing that? Like what would a scope of work look like to be able to capture that so that we understand, the approach and kind of can start to shop that around. Because I think to your point, it would be pretty compelling and good information for legislators and other decision makers to have when they consider the benefits of different actions and why they're important.
Yeah, and for both health and equity.
Right.
And then,
Probably won't we don't have the budget to do that in Tigger 2.0, but we will keep an eye. We talked about this before, so we are keeping an eye to get the baseline data to be able to do that analysis, and be great to work together to figure out how that analysis could get done and what the results would be, because I think it would be very telling.
It's a bit premature, but we are in discussions with DEQ as they are looking to the eventual community climate investments out of the CPP. To try to, and also actually as part of public health modernization, all of the counties in the state, June 30th, were supposed to submit their initial climate and health plans for their jurisdictions. And we're going to be analyzing those over the coming months. And that it's not going to be quantified, but to the degree that they identify as strategies to improve health, most of them prioritize smoke and heat as the priority health, climate-related health impacts that they want to focus on. So we're going to be analyzing what we're hearing from around the state, and through that process, it may be in some months we can come back to the commission and provide some qualitative insights about that. And we are in conversation with DEQ about the implications that may have eventually for the CCI.
that's great. Thank you, Gabriella. We'll look forward to that. I'm going to suggest we go ahead and go to break, and that
Yeah, Commissioner McDonald, sorry, I had just a question following up on your comment on Commissioner Apter's in terms of just getting a better feel for the timing. It's a little more clarity on, the Tigger 2.0 identifying the gap, presumably, and the state energy strategy that's being formulated. And I'm trying to understand, do we wait to see what the gap is and then there'll be commission discussion and input as to how to, rejigger, today OPB story is talking about 4 gigawatts of planned solar and wind energy not happening because of the federal actions. There's a lot of very current data. I don't know where that comes from, but how do we interrelate those two?
In terms of, Alan, do you want to just speak to the timing for the conclusion of these 2 studies? Nope, you're on mute.
For that part B, which I think Commissioner Thorndike you're talking about, which is how do we fill the gap? We're still working on how that process is going to play out and when. Um, and so we'll be seeking input from the commission on ideas for that. But we're also working with our sister agencies on things they have that in their back pockets that are above and beyond what we're expecting to do in the programs and regulations that we already have adopted. So there's a lot of things that we don't know that are going to occur within CPP that are going to get us to the reduction goal. Same with the HB 2021, which is 100% renewables for the IOUs that'll get us there. We don't know exactly how those two things are going to work. So we have to figure out what it is above and beyond those things we don't know are going to fill the gap. When we tried to do that with Tigger 1.0, we ended up with 35 small actions because we were trying to think, okay, well, we could do more weatherization, but we're probably going to do a lot of it in HB 2021 and in the regular course of events. So what is it that we could do beyond that? So that's what the gaps analysis is going to be. So we're working with our sister agencies to figure out some of that, but also the commission and we have we're going to have some more work groups to help us figure that part out as well as the public.
Great, thanks.
Commissioner Thorndike.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
I would just add, I think there's plenty of information for us to start to dig into and a lot of challenges we already know are out there that need to be, the focus of our discussions. We talked a little bit about transmission and some of the challenges around making sure we're getting transmission built and how we need to do that and what kinds of additional actions could support that kind of work. So I think there are opportunities for us to kind of go ahead with the dialogue and not wait until we have kind of the answer or a full analysis. But then, as we get better information through these studies, we can circle back to those conversations. But I say we keep driving forward.
This OPB story kind of focuses on the timing aspect and how important that is. And I mean, I can't be super optimistic about that. But it sounds like there's a pretty brief window to try to at least minimize the damage from some of the actions. But
absolutely.
Yeah.
And one more comment about that OPB article. That's a lot of hand-wringing from developers that are losing a pretty big incentive. The fact is that even without the incentive, wind and solar, the renewables and batteries are catching up really fast, are the lowest cost, least cost resources that are on the margin. And those are the ones that are going to be developed first. And with battery storage dropping dramatically, those are going to be the least cost path, regardless of federal incentives. And so there's a lot of economic impetus behind that pathway as opposed to other pathways. It'll probably make it harder and make it slower, but those resources are the ones that are going to be picked in a least cost planning mode.
Sure. And there's maybe actions we could take as a state to really encourage, to kind of leverage the underlying economic effect of doing it, because the other doesn't work. Actually, you can have all those incentives, and if they don't make sense economically for other reasons, they're not happening anyway. So yeah, that'll be good. Thanks.
Well, lots of rich discussion. So thanks and great questions from commissioners. I really appreciate that. We are over time, and I'm going to ask that we confine our break to 5 minutes and be back at 11:05. When you come back, please turn your video on so we can kind of take stock of that. But please be on time so that we don't eat into our next next set of interesting discussions. So thank you. I hope folks are ready to join back in. Apologies for the shorter break than we had hoped, but it's been a great discussion. So I'll wait to see folks turn their videos back on, and we can get started again. Great. I think we have a critical mass now, so we can turn to our next topic, which is a Natural Climate Solutions Workforce and Training Study. And this was something that we identified as being really important in our 2021 Natural and Working Lands proposal. So it's great to be kicking this work off, and I will turn things over to one of our consultants who's leading this project, Cynthia Guzman.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Chair McDonald, members of the commission. Very nice to see you all virtually today. My plan for the next couple of minutes is to give you all an overview of the Natural Climate Solutions Workforce Development and Training Programs Need Study for Natural and Working Lands. I had to take a breath there because it's very long term. But we're working with Alan and Liz and folks at Odo on this study, and we're just kicking it off in the last couple of days. So we're gonna share a little bit about the scope, what our plan is for the next couple of months, and I think we'll have time for some questions at the end if you all would like to ask any. So next slide, please. Great. So I'll talk a little bit about the project team. So about the project team that's going to be working on this today, share about the scope of work, and Q&A, as I said. Next slide. Okay, so this is the team that's going to be working on this study for the next couple of months. It's being led by Estelano Advisors. I'm a principal at Estelano Advisors. We're a urban planning and public policy consulting firm with folks with teams in Portland, Bay Area, and Los Angeles. We have a really long history of collaboration and partnerships with organizations that are planning for current and future workforce needs, particularly in climate-related sectors. We are joined by Echo Northwest, which is a public policy research firm with a team throughout Oregon and the West Coast, and they'll be taking on a lot of the quantitative analysis. And then we're also joined by Cumumela Consulting, which is an Indigenous engagement firm. And really their work is going to be engaging a lot of the tribal organizations throughout the state in order to inform this study, which we're incredibly grateful for. Next slide. So this is the consultant team that will be leading this work. I have over 10 years advising public, private, and nonprofit sector clients on programs and policies that are really at the intersection of climate and workforce development. So I've worked on a variety of projects throughout my career that look at the workforce potential of infrastructure investment, everything having to do with a lot of the energy efficiency investments that were happening in the 2010s, along with a lot of investments here locally in my hometown of Los Angeles around stormwater infrastructure. We've also done a fair amount of advising around maximizing the benefits of hiring folks of color and disadvantaged populations in the construction sector throughout the country. So on this project, I'm also joined by my colleague, Rahi Reddy. She is based in Portland, Oregon, and directs our Pacific Northwest office. Prior to her being at Estelano Advisors, she was the head of equity over at Oregon Metro. So folks may know her from that role, and she will be bringing in her expertise to this project as well. And my colleague Ellen Binney is on the line, so I'd like to take the chance for her to introduce herself as well.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you this morning. I am an associate with Estelano Advisors out of the Portland office, along with Rahi. I have a focus in equitable economic development work, including workforce development. And I also have experience working at Odo as an intern while getting my planning degree and working on the electric school bus guidebook a few years ago. So there's lots of familiar faces and names from the agency on this morning's call. And yeah, it's great to be back and very excited to be engaged in this work.
Thanks, Ellen. And we also have folks from Echo Northwest along the bottom left-hand side of the slide there. Melissa and Peyton specifically will be kind of our primary team members in this work. And then, of course, we're also joined by Serena Fasthorse from Kimimela Consulting, who will be leading a lot of our engagement with tribal organizations. Next slide.
Cynthia, if I might, again, we were very fortunate to get another all-star rock star team to be able to help us with this work with Estelano and Echo Northwest and Kimimela. These people have got great expertise and experience doing exactly this kind of work. So we're very fortunate to be able to have yet another group working on the stuff that we're doing that's kind of innovative, but with a lot of experience. So we're really looking forward to working with on this project with this excellent team as well.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate that. I will share a little bit about Estelano Advisors project experience. So this is something that's a little more local to Oregon. We recently completed a project with the workforce development boards in the Portland and Washington region. So that was Work Systems, Workforce Southwest Washington, and Clackamas Workforce Partnership. So we did a comprehensive workforce market study of the Interstate Bridge program, which is the bridge that's connecting Portland over to the Washington side. Essentially, the study helped inform the policy development and workforce strategies and investments to ensure that that the investment in the bridge replacement could also result in job creation and connections to jobs for folks in the community that are looking to get into the construction sector. So this was a project that we recently completed with those folks. Another project that we're doing currently, and this is for the Southern California Association of Governments down here in Southern California, we're currently engaged in a natural and agricultural lands benefit study. So one of the things that this study aims to do down here is address the information gap as it relates to ecosystem services, resilience benefits, and economic benefits in the natural and agricultural lands space here in the Southern California region. So we're leading the stakeholder engagement process that includes mapping and focus groups with city, county staff, farm workers, natural resource agencies, tribal communities, land trusts, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's a little bit about our experience. Next slide. And I won't pretend to know all about Echo and Kimimela Consulting's experience here, but one of the things that I will say about Echo Northwest is that they recently completed a forestry study that is incredibly relevant to the work that we will be doing as part of the Natural Climate Solutions study. So that's going to be a lot of their learnings there will, translate right over to some of the ideas and the concepts that we're going to be exploring as part of our own charge here today. Also for Kimimela Consulting, I'll just share that Serena has a wealth of experience bringing folks together to develop policy recommendations and different types of recommendations in order to better integrate the perspectives and traditional ecological knowledge of tribes into policymaking and conversations, which we think is incredibly important to this effort. Next slide. I will talk about our scope of work next. Our scope has 10 tasks total, but for purposes of this presentation, I've condensed these into 3 phases of work. So there's the first phase that we're just starting now. This is the engagement and data collection phase. This includes a variety of interviews, desk research, engagement with standing working groups such as you all and commissions. The second phase will include quantitative data collection and the creation of occupational profiles workforce development and training program profiles, as well as figuring out what are the occupations that we are talking about when we talk about natural climate solutions and jobs within the natural and working land sector. We're also going to perform an assessment of the scale and composition of this natural climate solutions workforce as we have defined it as part of phase 1. And as part of phase 3, we're going to bring it all together. Our team is going to evaluate the robustness of the sector and identify some challenges, needs, and gaps that may affect its ability to meet the state's climate goals, because we strongly believe that you need to have a trained workforce in order to implement the projects and solutions that we need. And we think that's incredibly important. Further, we're going to make recommendations for partnerships, programs, policies, and data recommendation improvements that could put the state on a path to a more robust workforce ecosystem. Next slide. So I'll talk a little bit about the phase 1. It's sort of a two-pronged approach. We're going to be doing individual conversations with partners, that's tribal and tribal-related partners, workforce development, training providers, key employers throughout the state, throughout all land sectors, natural lands, working lands, et cetera. And we're also going to be checking in periodically with groups such as yours. We met with the Natural and Working Lands Advisory Committee a couple of weeks ago, and we are talking to an interagency working group next week. So we're going to be meeting with these folks at various cadences throughout the project to give folks an update on where we are, get some feedback, and integrate a lot of that in real time as we complete our work. Next phase, next slide. And here I'll talk a little bit about the analysis and integration piece. So Echo Northwest is really going to be the firm that's going to be taking on the occupational analysis and workforce assessment. So by that, we mean, what are the actual jobs that we're talking about? So land conservationist 1 or laborer 2, really getting down to that level in terms of what are the jobs that we're talking about when we talk about jobs in the natural and working land sectors. And they're going to be looking towards a lot of state and federal data sources to figure out what the jobs are and the number of jobs that exist within the state of Oregon. And then based on that, they're going to do an assessment of the workforce, which means, what sectors are they employed in? Who are their employers? What are their general duties and qualifications, pay, demographics? And based on that, kind of identify some trends or disparities that we might see that would give us a sense of what this workforce actually looks like. We understand, at least anecdotally, that there's a lot of seasonal labor. Some jobs may be pretty well compensated, some jobs might be less compensated. So we're going to get a kind of a bird's eye view from a data perspective on what that looks like. And then on the qualitative side, Estelano Advisors is going to be doing a kind of a scan of training programs within Oregon to kind of look at what the work training ecosystem actually looks like. Who's doing the training? What are some of the key characteristics of these programs? What sort of training do they offer? How many graduates do they tend to have per year, and where are they eventually placed? And that, in combination with our one-on-one interviews, will give us a better sense of where there's some areas where we think that the ecosystem is doing well and where there could be some additional investment. So we have the quantitative data work that Echo will be doing, and then there's going to be the qualitative interviews and research that Estelano Advisors will be doing. And with that, we're going to bring that together and make an assessment. What are the gaps? What are some places in which we could make some additional investments, or with some additional investments should be made in order to better support this workforce? So that's going to comprise the needs analysis, and then it's all going to come together in a final report. And I think that's my last slide. Yep, that's my last slide. I'm happy to take any questions at this time. I'd also appreciate, we could take the slides now too, so I could see folks. Thanks.
Thank you, Cynthia. That was a great overview of the work that you're doing. Any questions from commissioners?
Chair McDonald, can I add one more thing to it?
Absolutely.
There's another workforce study that's underway that's related to the Oregon State Energy Strategy. And so that's taking the output of the portfolio of resources that come out of the least cost path in the state energy strategy, and is actually using econometrics to figure out how many jobs per $1 million invested there are. So we're going to get a separate type of analysis done on the sector-based side of this equation that will look at how many jobs, where they are, what kind of jobs there are, and then we're doing a follow-on contract with the University of Oregon to look at the training needs and existing infrastructure that we have in Oregon on that side too. So these two studies are going to be in parallel, and they're going to be working on the resource side or the sector-based side, and then on the natural working land side. Unfortunately, on this one, we don't have a bunch of dollars invested to be able to use as a metric to figure out how many jobs that we need, but we're going to try to get at that as much as possible. So the two things are going to be a very valuable look at the overall climate change and natural working lands areas with regard to workforce.
Thank you, Alan. Seeing no other hands, maybe I'll just give you all an opportunity to think about your questions. I recall when looking at some of the federal data, for example, in the forest sector, that the job categories were very broad. And so making it kind of seemingly pretty difficult to figure out exactly what kind of training needs you might have. And I wonder if you can speak at all to the work that Echo Northwest did that you mentioned on the forest sector, and whether they were able to get more detailed categories for that sector, for example. And
yeah. I wish we had a representative from Echo Northwest there that could speak more to their methods. I think one approach that we will take for this study is, that's where I think the interviews will be really key to really understand, you know, for particular jobs in the forestry sector, what is their actual, you know, what does their job actually comprise? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that they actually need in order to perform their job successfully? And are employers actually able to find those candidates in the market? And I think that's where we're going to get a little bit of that additional insight that unfortunately the published Bureau of Labor Statistics data, state data, may not be able to get us, and kind of provide a bit more color to what the numbers are not telling us. But I think that's a very good question. And I think we're going to rely very much on ECHO's lessons learned in the forestry study to inform what we might do here.
Great, thank you. And then a second kind of somewhat related question. In other work that I've done, we tried to look at how to build the workforce to do more of this work, this kind of work. And you know, one of the things that we learned in that was, you know, there are kind of rules and laws or policies and programmatic approaches that might be making it more challenging. And the example that came to mind for me in that, and I'm not positive I'm getting it right, but it's a good illustration, was that on federal lands that there have to be 2 people to go do cone collection, and both of them are supposed to know all the stuff about what are the right cones. And one of the comments was that actually, you know, you could probably get somebody who's really good at rock climbing to be one of those 2 people, and have somebody that really knows how to select the right cones and make those decisions, and maybe expand the search image and potential job pool or employee pool that could be used to kind of engage in this work. Is that something you found in other areas?
Yes. So, I mean, to me, what you're talking about is maybe some of the policy or programmatic restrictions that have been in place for a very long time and may not make sense for the needs of our actual needs of employers, the actual needs of the workforce today. I mean, I think about how there's a lot of entry level jobs that require a bachelor's or master's degree, and often you don't need that in order to perform some of the jobs. I also think about here in California, and I'm sure this also has come up in Oregon and other states across the West. We have a lot of our incarcerated folks performing forest management work. And when they leave prison and would like to get a job with the fire department, they are unable to because they have a previous record. So one of the recommendations that has been a part of the discussion for quite a long time has been, record expungements for folks that have been able to demonstrate, incredible service doing forestry management, because we need folks with those skills, but there's just that one thing that's holding them behind. To the extent that that comes up in our research, and I suspect it might be, again, through the qualitative research, I think we'll certainly note it, particularly if there's a role that state and Odo and state agencies have in changing that. We're going to be talking to the interagency working group at several points throughout this process. To the extent something like that comes up, like, oh, hey, there's this state requirement that feels more onerous than helpful, but may have felt incredibly helpful 30, 40 years ago. That's the place where we could note it. And eventually this is supposed to be a roadmap for Odo and partners to take on. And that could form a platform or a basis of future action.
Great. Thank you, Cynthia. That was a second great example.
Yeah.
I also assume that in these interviews, you'll note issues that might come up that are contributing challenges. And I'm thinking about California. I know one of the big issues that has come up in California, and I think would come up in Oregon too, is housing costs and availability for folks to get out and do this work.
Yeah, certainly. And we're definitely thinking about some of those other issues, be it housing, transportation, childcare, that really serve as a hindrance to folks getting into a job, staying in a job, advancing through a job. So we definitely have an eye to that. Particularly my colleague Rahi's been doing a lot of thinking around creating more supports in the childcare space for workers. So that's certainly in our minds.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. Questions from commissioners? Liz, is there anything you want to add relative to this project?
I think I would add that we're having robust discussions on how best to communicate this work, since natural climate solutions is a relatively new term, and you can get really jargony in the climate space across the whole climate action space. And so talking together about how to communicate best in terms of land protection, restoration, enhancement, land management practices, like terms that people who are doing these jobs are more familiar with to start with, and then being able to translate that into like the terms that we're using in this in the work. So that's just top of mind because we just had that conversation, and lots of fruitful conversations are coming up like that. So really excited about this work. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, great point, Liz. Thanks for that.
Great. Well, thank you. If there's nothing else, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. And yes, we're very excited about getting to this topic. We're starting to hear your results, so thank you for joining us. So on to our next agenda item. We talked about kind of what has been going on what went on during the 2025 legislative session as it was going on. Now we have an opportunity to kind of take stock of what came out of that and to begin to think about how we might approach our work to make sure that we're well set up for the next legislative session, the next short and long legislative sessions coming up. So I'll turn it over to Christy Split. We are hoping she's going to give us kind of an intro and then hoping to get a lot of feedback and other perspectives from other commissioners after she presents. So
great. Thank you so much, Chair McDonald. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, it's lovely to be here today. I am the Government Relations Coordinator for the Oregon Department of Energy, along with, well, really, I should give credit to my colleague, Wendy Simons, who produces the legislative memos related to climate legislation for the Commission. And actually, I kind of will start out by saying she's really close to finishing her update on all those climate bills and how they fared this particular session, as well as our Odo end of session report will be posted any day. So once those do wrap up, then I'll make sure Jeff Crook gets those out to you all in the very near future. I was hoping I'd have the end of session report ready today. It's real close. It's actually because I got ideas for bills to add from putting this slide deck together that I'm not quite done. So I want to add a few more bills and then that'll be ready to roll. So moving on though, beyond that sort of logistical update of where sort of the meteor reports, when those will land on your desks. I want to be really clear that my work is generally focused on bills that give the Department of Energy new work and our budget, or bills that sort of directly affect the issues that we work on. So there's going to be others on this call that know legislation that I'm going to talk about better than me. And I absolutely encourage you to raise your hand, weigh in. We'll keep an eye out for hands raised because I really want to make sure that as we're going through this, when we're talking about the bills, you're welcome to participate and say what you want, and then we'll have a little conversation at the end too. So kind of an open door policy throughout here. Just as a reminder of what we work on, and we sort of serve as like an energy think tank. So we do track energy legislation really closely. We also track legislation related to energy facility siting, emergency response, and then anything having to do with radioactive waste. Nuclear power was a really hot topic this year. And those were the kinds of things that our staff were paying really close attention to. But then, you know, we also have work that is new to us, like natural climate solutions that we were paying close attention to. And again, like I said, we'll talk about some things that maybe we weren't paying as close of attention to that you might be a better person to weigh in on. And then just to share really broadly, I'm sure you've all probably read the slide as I've been kind of leading in here, but just a little bit about context. So because of rising costs, the end of post-session pandemic fund or post-pandemic funds, we all knew going into session that budgets were tight. I'd say that it felt like budgets would be sort of flat. Agencies were directed to stick closely to what's called current service level. And current service level is a little bit confusing because it often backs out general fund. So for example, at the Department of Energy, we had multiple general fund funded incentive programs, but we could only include one of them in our agency budget, even though we thought all those programs were great because there was such a tight budget expected, just to kind of give an example of the flavor headed into session. And that was true across most agencies, most issues that you kind of entered session expecting to stay kind of where you were. And in the end, I think that was smart in a sense, because as it turns out, while we started with that flat budget theory, by the time the May revenue forecast rolled around, it was actually a $500 million cut that was required to both the governor's recommended budget and the co-chair's budget, which is sort of an interim budget that the co-chairs of the budget committee or Ways and Means put out, usually mid-session. And so that all that work had been done, expecting sort of a certain number related to that sort of flat budget, but then to have it go down 500 million from what was expected led to kind of a big scramble to make those cuts and make the budget work out between that May 14th revenue forecast and the end of session in late June. And that was a huge, I would say that overall budget issues were to me, the overriding force, I guess, in this particular session. I'll also flag that session started out with some new leadership on energy issues. Specifically, we had a new House Climate, Energy and Environment Chair, John Lively, and then also new leadership in the House and new leadership in the House and Senate Republican offices. I've been in the legislature a while, and when there's a lot of newness, it usually just takes time for everybody to kind of figure out their relationships with each other. A lot of times they're the ones negotiating on how things play out on the floor or with certain policy, especially hot ticket items, and often climate are those kind of hot ticket items, climate related legislation. And it did seem like starting out, there was this real obvious focus on giving more hearings on Republican bills and really trying to give more voice to the minority party. And the goal was to reduce rancor. It's really been in recent years a lot of walkouts, a lot of slowdowns to the legislative process. And I do think that it did seem like everyone was getting along better than usual. And I think it was just a different approach. But that different approach paired with a big increase in the number of bills that were introduced. At the time that pre-session filing happened, there were about 1,000 more bills, in fact, than usual. And in the end, there were about 500 more bills. And that's a 14% increase from 2023. And I looked back in like 2017, 2019, 2021, 2023, we're all pretty consistent in the number of bills. So to have that 14% increase paired with hearing more bills than usual, having more hearings on bills than usual, I think it led to, in the end, a big sort of like a lot of things that were left to be dealt with at the end of session or toward the end of like when deadlines were pending. So kind of a rushed nature to session 2. And in the end, on a couple of things related to climate or energy work, there were some things that were left on the table, I think, because they just didn't quite get settled in time. So with all of that said, we can turn to climate and we can go to the next slide. And I won't beat around the bush. I would just say from my perspective that it felt like a tough year for policies and programs that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Defense had to be played on those programs throughout. And then those same programs you all were talking about with the TIGR analysis that are necessary to meet our greenhouse gas goals. Our climate advocates were having to fight to keep those programs in place. At the same time as they were trying to, advocate for funding for climate programs. And at the same time, there were some major legislative issues and policy issues afoot. So there was just a lot going on. And in the end, I would guess, and other people could give their opinion, but I would guess most people that care about reducing emissions didn't feel like session ended in a way that felt particularly great. So I will just say that and put that out there, not to be overly negative, but I think just to be candid. So the way that I divided up this review of legislation is by the recommendations in the 2024 Oregon Climate Action Report to the legislature. And I'll just start with that protecting existing programs item. And this is where I really encourage people that want to say something about a bill or an issue to feel free to raise their hand and jump in. So as I mentioned, there was a lot of defense played. That defense was of the climate protection program. Often that defense was sometimes about just defending regulatory authority in general. And then also advanced clean trucks. The very first day, I think, of hearings in the House Climate, Energy, and Environment Committee included a bill that would have delayed the implementation of advanced clean trucks, which did happen by rule later. So there was that defense played, and I would say that for the most part, that defense, those programs were held in place. But I think there's still consideration and chatter and talk about potentially revisiting the idea of a cap and trade program for the state to fund transportation. That could have implications on other energy policies. So I think everybody's still feeling like that's a little bit left in the air, and perhaps more conversation in the interim between sessions. Then we also saw really limited, maybe even no new investments in climate related incentive programs. A lot of these are newer programs that have been stood up since roughly 2019, including ODO programs like the Oregon Solar and Storage Rebate, but also including other programs at other agencies, climate resilience hubs at the Department of Human Services, just to give one example, where these programs have been put in place in recent years. And because of the funding situation, there were no new dollars invested in those programs. Some of those programs still have dollars. A good example of that is our agency's Community Renewable Energy Grant Program. So that program can continue for another year or so as is. providing opportunities for grant applications for clean energy projects. But just to be clear, there with no new funding for that and other programs, I would call them all on pause, at least at this point. And so if you look again back at the TIGR, where those incentives play a role in reducing emissions, those programs are on hold. Another one that hits close to home came up earlier. There was no new investment in the Natural and Working Lands Fund. I'll also just flag that there was a bill that would have made some modifications to, in the mind of many advocates, improve implementation of House Bill 2021, and that bill did not pass out of committee. And then related to and that's obviously a major driver of in the TIGR report of future emissions reductions. There were also some related legislation that were big deals within the energy sector, again, where there is that need to transition to clean energy to meet our goals. The grid enhancing technology and energy facility siting modifications that came out of Representative Gamba's committee that this commission heard about at a prior meeting. Two of the bills in his package did pass. And I would say those bills certainly are steps in the right direction on either making better use of the transmission that we have, but also making some changes to our requirements for facility siting that could make those processes faster. But I don't necessarily think that Representative Gamba or others feel that area is done. Like, I think they believe there's more that needs to be done. And that brings me to the next item. That same group was working on an electric transmission authority. That bill did not pass out of committee. So I believe folks that want to see more transmission in Oregon faster still feel like there's work to do there. So while you see that green check, I would say that's a bit of a mixed result for that crew. And then also another major issue is wildfire liability. And while we all know how wildfire relates to climate change in many ways, when it comes to the energy sector, recent cost drivers that have increased rates in Oregon, those have been in many cases attributed to wildfire work that's being done by utilities to prevent future wildfires. And there's concern that if the utility resources and rate increases are going toward that, then it'll be harder for utilities to find resources to invest in clean energy infrastructure going forward. And that issue was also left on the table and was an example of one of those things that was kind of moving along, would get really heated up near a deadline and kind of move along, but not quite all the way through. And in the end, it just ran out of time on the clock. There was a bill that passed off the House floor, but it did not have time to be considered and move in the Senate. The bill passed the House on the last day of session. So anybody, I actually am doing a bad job of keeping an eye on hands. Is there anybody that wants to say anything about this?
Watching hands.
Oh, thanks, Kathy. I now have it up. I just didn't before.
Just one thing I really appreciate about how you organize this is it gives us both like all the related concepts of the things that did move and the things that didn't, that we might want to come back to and kind of dig into what some of the reasons were and what we might be able to do to shore it up for the next opportunity.
Yeah, thanks. I always think it's important to keep an eye on what passed and what didn't. I also forgot to say, I moved away from my talking points. I might not categorize all these in the ways that make the most sense to you, but just know that, there's some things that just fall under multiple categories as we go through. We can go to the next slide if nobody has their hand up and I don't see any questions in the chat, but please, folks, feel free to join in the conversation anytime. Okay, so next up is a few different recommendations and a few example bills. A major one for this group is adopting updated state greenhouse gas goals consistent with best available science. We had a couple of runs at this legislation now as a state in the last few years. And the most recent one of those, House Bill 3477, did not pass out of committee. Next up, there was, we have sort of a resilience recommendation. Resilience came up in lots and lots of different places. So this is an example where there's bills that could also be categorized as resilience, including a lot of those climate programs that went unfunded. But a great example of something positive that happened related to climate is a couple of bills passed that can reduce barriers to microgrid development. So one of those bills is pretty simple, just requires kind of an alternate path for a report that needs to be done for microgrids to be developed, but the other sends some direction to PUC. So it's sort of now it's time for an agency to do the work to actually make that happen. So I'm sure folks that worked on that legislation will be watching closely. Yeah, Carter, I'm getting to transportation. Don't think I'm not. I kind of just put these in a funky order because of the slides, like where there were fewer ones. So then position the state to take full advantage of federal investments in climate action. Another big deal bill that we were tracking closely as an agency because it would have directed work to us, but a lot of people on this call cared about too. House Bill 3181. There was also a Senate buddy that would have built out the one-stop shop for energy efficiency. I think we've talked to you all before about the Oregon the Energy Hippo. It's a new website for us where you can kind of put some basic information about yourself or a friend or neighbor, whatever, and look up what energy incentives might be available to them, specifically targeting energy efficiency. And this is from past legislation. It's also part of our work to implement some federal grant programming. And so building that out to not just be a website, but more of a bigger resource with people and staff that can help folks navigate the world, really complicated world of energy incentives. Oregon's special in how complicated our web is when it comes to incentives. So that bill did not pass, and I imagine that work will continue to be a topic of discussion. We can go to the next slide, and here's, I think, where we'll get to new programs, new ideas, which is where the transportation package is, where I nested that. So next was advancing a set of climate actions to help Oregon meet accelerated greenhouse gas reduction goals. And there was definitely a major effort. And again, really encourage folks that are on the call that worked on this to feel free to weigh in. We were definitely more watching from our think tank role perspective and not as involved as others. But the transportation reinvestment package was a huge deal. And there was also a lot of prep work ahead of session. A coalition was formed from the sort of climate perspective, I would say, came together. And we're really arguing for some forward-thinking policies around electrification, for example, in the transportation package. And in June, when the bill was introduced, which is quite late, the bill didn't have any of those transportation electrification measures. It did have some pieces that could go toward reducing vehicle miles traveled. It had a new road user fee to move away from a gas tax, which is something that the environmental community, there were things that the environmental community, that climate coalition that came together around issues like transit safety, or there was also transit funding. So there was enough in there that from a climate perspective, people were pretty neutral on the bill, I would say. And again, I'm speaking for others here. People are welcome to weigh in. We just went to like a really different slide. Sorry. So one more back, please. And then, but essentially that package was very late in coming. There were a lot of, there was a lot of drama in the committee. Anybody who was watching closely, there was arguments, committee members leaving, new committee members coming on. In the end, they had to kind of reappoint some members in order to pass the bill out of committee. And then it never came up for a House vote because it came out, at least in the news, that there weren't the votes in the Senate. And so the House just declined to take a vote on a pretty major set of tax increases. And so that bill is set aside. There was sort of a last-ditch effort to do just an ODOT funding bill that also didn't pass, didn't make it across the finish line. The governor, the day after session came out, was loud and clear that filling the hole at ODOT left behind by the lack of a transportation reinvestment package was something she felt that a special session might be necessary for. So we're all still watching to see what will happen on that particular issue. As a state agency employee, it's been pretty rough to see some pretty major layoffs happening at the Oregon Department of Transportation this week in the news, and those are coming at the end of the month because of the lack of a package passing. But from a climate perspective, I would say what's really interesting is I think a lot of the things that people were hoping would be in that package weren't even in the bill. So I would say that it was, from me as somebody watching, I imagine that if I'd been a transportation advocate, wanting to see greenhouse gas reductions, the whole situation would have felt pretty rough. So hopefully that's fair. So that's the situation there and where we are. There was some bills that did pass that were new ideas. There was a methane leakage control concept that I believe started out to cover landfills generally and was amended down to cover just one, but that is a step forward where we can take a look at those methane emissions from landfills and see if technology to reduce those landfills can reduce we know those can reduce our emissions, and so getting those into place and starting to have reductions in that sector. And then also there was a carbon sequestration study funded at Dogami for $10 million. One thing about that, you might wonder, why did we lose all these programs, but this new one got funded? That really was quite antithetical to what people were talking about related to budget, but it's not funded with general fund. It's funded with some special dollars that were more available. And then finally, I meant to write out TENS pilot. I'm sorry. Senate Bill 1143. This was another priority for the environmental community, was looking at really like district heat or those types of concepts, like where you can, it's district heat is what it's called. And now I feel like I can't think of how to define it. I'll phone a friend. If anybody wants to talk about the TENS pilot that's on the call that was working on that, that'd be great. I don't want to get it wrong. But essentially that just a way of more efficient heating.
TENS stands for?
That's what I'm nervous about. It's I'm
Okay,
happy to
sorry,
chime in. Yeah,
Christine.
somebody chime in. I meant to write out what it stood for.
Thank you, Commissioner Apter.
Sure. So TENS stands for Thermal Energy Networks. And this bill actually was one that was, I would say, a really shared effort and interest on behalf of gas utilities and labor partners, because what is exciting about TENS is that it offers, it's a technology that offers efficient heating and cooling, but it leverages existing, utility expertise and underground infrastructure. And so there is continuing to be growing, I would say, interest and momentum for beginning to implement TENS as a method of decarbonization in Oregon. And this was hopefully going to be a good way to kind of jumpstart that with a very, very low upfront cost and fiscal. But as Christy mentioned at the outset, I think unfortunately just fell victim to the sheer number of bills that were hanging out there, particularly in Joint Ways and Means at the end of session.
And Commissioner Apter, while you have the floor, do you want to kind of add anything to what Christy said about how folks were feeling about the transportation package?
Sure. And maybe just to take a step back, Chrissy, I just really appreciate your framing and summary overall. I think from my perspective really hits the mark just in terms of sheer number of bills, and not just, those that were introduced, but those that got significant airtime, energy and attention devoted to them in their respective energy and environment committees, and kind of just how that played into dynamics overall. And unfortunately resulted in limited opportunities for input. I think the greenhouse gas emissions update bill was one of those that just had, really, really limited time in committee for consideration, and didn't even make it, past the first chamber deadline. And just agree with you with your take overall in terms of, unfortunately, this being far from a banner year for climate progress in Oregon, and part of that being the sheer amount of defense that was that needed to be played in terms of attempts to delay or roll back existing programs or protections, or add, new barriers to like clean energy development, et cetera. Transportation was definitely no exception. And as you mentioned, the proposed bill HB 2025 did not include any investments for clean electric transportation. In particular, a big focus and expectation was that the bill would prioritize investments in medium heavy duty electrification, so clean truck incentives. There's an existing program that was created at DEQ, medium heavy duty charging infrastructure, especially given that so much of the legislative conversation was focused on delaying our advanced clean truck rule, and that conversation centered around we need to support businesses in the transition. We need to make sure that we have a charging network that is built out. We were really hopeful that this transportation opportunity would help support some of those needs that had been identified. Likewise, there was interest in funding new electric school bus incentive and technical assistance program, supporting our community charging networks. I could go on, but as you said, there were no investments in any of those programs included in the bill. And then equally concerning, there were new fee structures proposed, as you mentioned, the new road user charge, which is an important way to help, in theory, create equity, pay equity in terms of drivers on the road supporting maintenance. But the way that that was structured, both the overall RUC as well as a new delivery fee for electric vehicles, there were a lot of concerns that the structure would have actually made it more expensive in some cases to drive an electric or plug-in hybrid vehicle than a gas or diesel powered one. I could go on. I'm happy to talk more offline. I know we have a lot to get to, but it was a really, really big part of this session. So I do think it's worth spending time on. And it's also our largest polluting sector, as we all know. So was more to say, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Commissioner Apter. Appreciate that perspective. Any other folks want to comment on transportation or the things on this slide?
And then I just have, I think, kind of one more slide.
Great.
That's actually content. There were also many bills that related to climate that were outside commission recommendations. This is in kind of small print, but there were a lot of bills passed related to energy rates. This included some general changes to how rates change at PUC. And I'm going to talk in really simple terms, but something akin to a rate class for data centers as they come online and require new investments in energy systems. There was also a bill passed for the PUC to work on creating a performance-based regulation that would change to more of a, would allow for a PUC to sort of set metrics for utilities to hit on a variety of topics, and then that would be used as a regulatory tool there. But then also just to be clear that there was one that did not pass, Senate Bill 888. So even though I gave it a green check, overall there was some work left undone there to protect ratepayers. So that was one area with a lot of action that doesn't necessarily reduce emissions, but does very much relate to the work that you all do. There was a climate superfund legislation. This has been sort of a trend around the country in climate policy. I believe Vermont and New York have policies in place where you would treat the climate situation a bit like a superfund. Polluters would pay into a fund that would be used to mostly in this case fund more to fund adaptation versus mitigation. Things like resilience projects would fit the bill versus like clean energy development, if that makes sense. So that bill did not pass out of committee. There was similarly with a ton of support from the climate activists in the state, an environmental rights amendment bill that had a hearing but did not pass out of committee. That would have actually been a little of a flip on the climate superfund model and actually say that state agencies were required to protect the environmental rights of Oregonians and allow for Oregonians to sort of sue the state for past grievances, if you will, related to violations of people's newly established, if this were to pass, environmental rights. I mentioned before there was a lot of action on nuclear energy siting in the state. as well as some bills that dealt with energy facility siting. I grabbed one, Senate Bill 1034, that would have seen more local control within the energy facility siting process for the largest energy facility siting, or the largest energy facilities in the state. And then there were also a couple bills that passed. Some a climate analysis of PERS investment concept passed. It's considered sort of a first step in the idea of getting Oregon's PERS funds out of investments in fossil fuels. And then House Bill 3365, which includes climate change and academic standards. So with that, I open the door to any additional questions, conversation. The last slide is just kind of a conversation slide. And Nora already did a great job of starting that conversation, but happy to take questions, talk through anything else. Really would love to hear from you, your thoughts on session or bills or things that I might have missed, most importantly.
First, thank you, Christy. That was a great overview. So to Christy's point, other input from or questions from commissioners about the legislative session. And I do want to recognize that Isaac Insko is here representing Representative Levy, and he's on her staff. And so appreciate that you're here with us, and certainly want to give you an opportunity to say anything if you want, but just open it up to all commissioners.
While we're in that moment of awkward silence while people decide if they want to talk or not, I just did want to flag that I was really trying to give this from the perspective of greenhouse gas emissions, this presentation. And so Odo didn't necessarily have positions on a lot of these bills or work on them. So I meant to kind of say that at the beginning, that just a little disclaimer that I was really trying to focus on just strictly thinking of it as being sort of like, if a human embodiment of your report, the Tigger could have an opinion.
Thank you. That's very helpful, and appreciate that approach, because I think that's the right approach for this commission.
Right, no tough questions. I think I'm getting off the hook, but I do always love to hear from you all. And thanks so much, Nora, for also sharing the climate solutions recap. I'm very jealous that I don't have mine to share, but I just have a few bills to add, and then we'll get it out there.
I think yours will be much more comprehensive, Christy. So really looking forward to that as well.
And you mentioned that there are going to be two summaries, one that Wendy's doing that kind of is maybe broader, and then one that's more focused on Odo, and that those will be ready and will be sent out to the commission, and I presume posted someplace where the public can find it relatively soon. Is that right, Christy?
Yeah. Wendy tends to produce more like a bill tracker that's like just a little bit of information about each bill. Yeah. The Odo one is more like paragraph summaries of each bill.
Great. Thank you. I don't see any hands. If I can't see your hand and you want to speak, jump in.
We're ready for lunch. I did leave my email address here, so anytime anyone wants to reach out on anything, my door's open. I'm happy to talk to commissioners, public that are listening about legislation.
Commissioner Apter.
Thank you. I don't have any tough questions for you, Christy. As I said, thought you did a really great job of summarizing a very long roller coaster of a session. I guess I would just emphasize a few of the points that you hit on in terms of unfinished business and kind of expectations for what comes next and what will take precedent in terms of conversations in the legislature for the interim. And Chair McDonald, I don't mean to get ahead. We might be getting into that as we look to our upcoming meetings. But as you mentioned, Christy, of course, transportation will continue to be front and center. Some of the wildfire utility liability pieces that you hit on, also unfinished business. And then I do really appreciate your summary of some of the progress made in terms of addressing barriers to bolstering our transmission capacity, and just first really want to applaud Rep. Gamba, who's not with us today, but did an incredible job of leading that package, and also just recognize that, the bills that did pass were very much, kind of low-hanging fruit, and particularly given everything, unfortunately, that we're up against, given the reconciliation bill. And some of this was mentioned or referenced in the OPB article mentioned earlier, but I hope and expect that will continue to be a really important conversation and priority for the legislature and this commission. Thanks again, Christy, for your presentation and all the great work.
Thank you, Commissioner Apter.
As always, one session ends and the next begins.
Okay. I still don't see any other folks that want to jump in. Lots of great information for us to dig into more as we think about our future work. So our next agenda item is public comment. And Jen, do you have folks that have signed up for public comment, or you want to mention to folks how they could do that?
Yeah, Amanda, if she's still in here, as an attendee, wanted to make a public comment. So I'll be promoting her. If you want to make a public comment, you can comment in the chat and I'll promote you as a panelist where you can unmute.
Great. Amanda, thank you for joining us. Looking forward to hearing your comments. I know that you were instrumental in getting the funding for the study that we talked about during the workforce and training, and we're very involved in that work. So really, it's great to have you on today, and love to hear what you learned and what you want to say that might help us with our workforce study as well as any other thing.
Yes, and I'm, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. And sorry if you hear some screeching in the back. My almost 1-year-old son is with me here today. He wasn't able to go to daycare, so I apologize for anything that sounds unusual in the background. So thank you guys for having me. Good afternoon. I guess now afternoon, Chair McDonald and commissioners. I'm here on behalf of Associated Oregon Loggers as their forest policy manager and a certified forester to discuss and bring forward the results and highlights of the recently published Oregon Forest Operations and Management Workforce Study, another one of those lengthy, many word titled reports. This study was funded through Senate Bill 1552, the Education Omnibus Package in 2024, and overseen by the state's Workforce and Talent Development Board. This landmark study, led by a diverse steering committee of agency, academic, tribal, local government, and industry partners, offers the most comprehensive look to date in the state at the benefits, challenges, and opportunities of Oregon's in-woods forest workforce. The study states, quote, Oregon's forest operations and management sector is a complex and multifaceted collection of industries, roles, and types of work that are critical to both the state's economy and its forest health, end quote. It highlights that, quote, the workforce contributes to climate resilience by supporting carbon storage and reducing the likelihood of high emission wildfire events, end quote. It also underscores the importance of workforce readiness in addressing Oregon's wildfire risk, housing demand, and forest health crisis. However, the report found the forest sector is facing a critical workforce shortage that cannot be ignored. Accordingly, according to the study, quote, retirement and other job turnover means that the sector will require a robust flow of newly trained workers for the foreseeable future, end quote, resulting in the need to, quote, replace at least 1 in 8 workers in these positions every year, end quote, or 3,400 employee need annually. However, the study highlights that, quote, completing the work these strategy reports call for in whole or in part will require a larger forest operations and management workforce than the state currently has or is projected to need in 2023, more than 3,400 new workers every year, end quote. The study also found there is a lack of training programs aligned to in-demand skills for the critical role contractors and operators play in delivering wildfire mitigation, restoration, and sustainable forest management on both public and private lands. So as you scope your natural climate solutions workforce and training needs study, we urge you to look up the ladder to the professional and technical careers that complement and support field-based operations while drawing from the strong foundational work already completed. The HEC study gives us a valuable head start. Let's now build on that foundation with a targeted focus on where our workforce systems must go next to accomplish the Oregon Climate Action Roadmap to 2030, the 2021 Natural and Working Lands Proposal, and Oregon's 20-year landscape resiliency strategy. These efforts span agencies, governments, landowners, and industries. Thank you guys for your leadership and your time today.
Thank you, Amanda. Great to hear some of the results of that study and more specifics, and kind of daunting to hear about the scope of expansion needed just in the inwards piece of that work. Can you speak to the question that I brought up earlier when we were talking about the natural climate solutions workforce study relative to whether Echo Northwest was able to kind of find more specific data to be able to break apart the different kinds of workers that we need in the woods and is available at the federal level?
Yeah, Chair McDonald, thank you for the question. So if you look at the executive summary and the findings of the report, one of the things that you'll see in there is that the ECHO team was not able to conduct a gap analysis. So we are hoping that, so what they did do was really look at the demographics, kind of a current state of affairs, and then utilizing ODO information or Oregon Department of Employment information, as well as the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And they looked at some stuff around trucking and sole proprietors and those pieces that really are not located in the federal and state kind of workforce information anywhere. We got a really good view about that, as well as training, looking at completer information for different types of degree programs, really more focused on the forestry management workforce, so more like the foresters rather than the forest operators and trucking workforce. So all of that is in for, I think all of that is in there. It's really critical information, but where we go from here is OFRI, Oregon Forest Resource Institute, has budgeted and specific focus for this next fiscal year in their strategic plan to carry forward some of these recommendations. And one thing that AOL will be pushing on is for them to complete a gap analysis that really gets at some of the questions that you guys are interested as well around, if we were to actually implement and achieve the objectives of the 20-year landscape resiliency strategy, some of the federal strategies, some of what you guys have outlined, what would we actually need, regardless of how realistic or actual it is, what would we actually need, and then how can we get there through both workforce development strategies as well as implementing new innovative technologies in our natural and working lands. So getting at that capacity in multiple ways.
Great.
So
thank you.
Long story short, right, we didn't quite get there, but there's plans to try to achieve that.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate you answering that question as well as the comments you made. Are there others, Jen, that have identified an interest in testifying?
No, Amanda was the only one.
Okay, great. Well, then let's move to our last agenda item, which is that agenda item of looking forward. And I asked staff to put in the deliverables that are in our work plan that will be driving a lot of our meetings in the coming months, and also is kind of a reason why we had to put in so many very detailed, or why we had to put so many topics on the agenda this time is because we really need to create that foundational information for commissioners about these studies so that we can, you know, in future meetings, hopefully start to dig in more detail on the results that we're seeing, any questions that might be coming up for staff at Odo or for the consultants. So this will be driving a lot of our future meeting agendas, but not entirely. So we've got opportunity in each of our meetings to discuss other topics that are important. So if you go to the next slide, we're trying to kind of look ahead a couple of meetings and draw from our work plan and the topics that came up in those work plans. We identified a number of tentative items for our next topic. We will continue to need to discuss it, but just to learn about some of the findings from the land-based net carbon inventory. And as we talked earlier in the meeting, we'll be hearing about from the Natural and Working Lands Fund agencies about what they're finding, what challenges they're having, what they're learning. We have a report that's due in September to the legislature on those funds. We've also had conversations with the VLCD about their great climate focused programs. And I think there's some good information that would be good for the commission to know about, you know, both on the mitigation side, but also on the adaptation side. We've been in discussions with tribal experts and leaders about trying to have a focused agenda with those leaders to hear priorities from the tribal perspective. And then as we discussed earlier, they're certainly want to come back to this. What are the impacts of the federal reconciliation bill and how should that be driving our agendas? So with that backdrop, these are, you know, the things that we've been thinking about. A number of other topics came up today, and be interested in hearing from commissioners what priorities you see for not just August, but for the next couple of meetings that we can start to schedule and get on the agendas. So with that, I'll open it up to commissioners. We're now on information overload, I think.
So, Chair McDonald, this is Carter McNichol.
Commissioner McNichol.
On the federal side, I believe that there are other implications of the work by DOJ and others that affect this area that are outside the reconciliation bill, like maybe an impact on the Green Bank and some of those things. Are we going to be able to understand those as well?
I think that's a great point, Commissioner McNichol. Certainly, you know, one of the topics that's been on my mind, and I know has been under discussion at the Board of Forestry, is, you know, some of the impacts to our federal agency partners and how that might affect some of our natural and working lands work here. So that I think that's a good point. I think there are a lot of additional things happening that we should be paying attention to. We talked a little bit about some of the changes in our April meeting, but they continue to evolve quickly. And I think, you know, really trying to make sure we're keeping our finger on that pulse is important. I think there was a lot of interest by commissioners to kind of keep this kind of federal impacts in general up at the top of our list. So I think that's a great flag, and we'll make sure that we don't just confine it. We might need to break it up into different meetings, but I think really making sure we're kind of taking stock of that on an ongoing basis is important.
Chair McDonald, on that note, I had been thinking similarly in terms of how we might consider breaking out our discussions around the reconciliation bill or federal rollbacks more generally. It could easily take up an entire meeting, and I think it deserves that much, if not more conversation. So I'm curious either if we potentially want to prioritize, or if we have the ability based on what these other items on the list need to be prioritized next month, given our work plans. Just if we want to spend the full time, or maybe recognize that in that high level conversation, if we do end up moving forward with that as part of the agenda next month, we can identify maybe some priority deep dive discussions that we would then add to the agenda for September and the rest of the year. Especially given that these conversations will be happening concurrently as the Tigger 2.0 analysis moves forward, and all that we want to make sure is incorporated and reflected there in terms of federal impacts. Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Apter. And I'll maybe follow up with you. Maybe Jeff and I can follow up with you, and we can kind of think together about how we might prioritize, break things up, and organize that, because it's a lot.
Yeah, sure. One other related question, or somewhat related to the ongoing Tigger conversation, I'd be interested to know, maybe from Director Benner or others, at what point it would make sense for the commission to discuss the energy strategy or get a presentation, recognizing we want what we talked about in terms of the goals of Tigger 2.0, complementing that work as much as possible.
Thanks, Commissioner Apter. I can jump in and say I think August would be a great time for a discussion of the energy strategy. We will have released draft recommendations to the public. And so we'd be happy to sort of talk to the commission about what we're thinking and get feedback there. So I say that without first having checked with Jeff and Alan, which I should have done, but I think August could be good timing for that. And I'll just chime in on the topic of the federal reconciliation bill, and to Commissioner McNichol's point. If we're going to talk about the impacts, I would suggest broadening it from just the reconciliation bill to appropriations and rescissions and policy decisions and executive orders. And I agree with Commissioner Apter that it would take a really long time to go through all of that, because there's been so much. So I'm happy to be part of the scoping conversation about what exactly commissioners are most interested in when it comes to federal activity.
Thank you, Director Benner. And we can confer more about the presentation on the energy strategy. I will remind, I think we had a presentation, an early presentation in April on the strategy, but it's certainly developed quite a bit since then. So it would be great to put it on our agenda in August. Other thoughts on agenda items coming up?
Chair McDonald, this is Louis Lem. Can you hear me?
Commissioner Lem?
Hi, how are you? Just maybe a brief suggestion or comment. All the information's been great today, so really happy to see all that good work and efforts going forward. I think at some point it might be useful to look at the transportation sector, maybe at some point in the future. Just in the last 2 weeks with, again, the passage of the federal bill, and also the activity or not yet passage of any transportation bill in the Oregon legislature. It seems like there's a lot of changes or potential changes in scenarios, especially what might be assumed for future greenhouse gas reductions. Probably the most significant one I'm sure people talked about and aware of is the clean car regulation, the ability for the states to implement clean cars requirements and what that means for the changing vehicle fleet. So maybe just something if we could put on a future agenda to look at what all these changes might mean for the transportation sector.
That sounds great. Thank you. Not seeing other hands. This is certainly a long list already, but always good to kind of get input so that we can start thinking about and organizing ourselves for getting good discussions going at our meetings. So appreciate that. If there are no other comments, I want to thank staff and our consultants for the great presentations today. I really appreciated all the good questions and comments from commissioners. And and with that, I will close the July 11th, 2025 meeting of the Oregon Climate Action Commission. And again, thank you.
Thank you.